Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial and to a very special live stream. I got three guests here. I got uh, Bryer from Bryer's Music Showcase. I got Garrett from Soundlab Studios. And I've got Nick from his channel. Nick.
Yep. Yeah, just say Nicholas. My last name is very complicated.
Yeah. Nick Y. Um, yes, and usually you see us on Garrett's channel Studios as we cover different albums and so forth. But this was an idea I had, and it's something I wanted to do for a little while. I came up with this idea to how would I, if I was to talk to somebody who wasn't familiar with each decade of music, like they were 1960s. And the reason why I start with the 1960s because you could go to the 1950s. 1950s, rock and roll music really kind of starts and really comes huge. And speaking for me, and I think I can speak for all four of us, is my specialty in music is rock music, pop music, and folk music, and a combination of the three. I think that's kind of similar to all four of us. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So there's obviously tons of genres out there, and to be honest, we're probably not gonna cover all the genres. Like country music, I'm just not a country music guy. I don't think any are. So if you want to do 50 best country music albums, that would have to be a different list, and it have to be probably somebody else who's more of an expert in that field than me. I wouldn't be very, very good at that field. And I would say that for a lot of genres. For me, just like straight out like blues instrumentals or jazz instrumentals or rap music, there's certain genres I'm not well versed in. And so, but I think for us we have a lot of knowledge in rock music, folk music, and all the kind of genres that kind of fit underneath that roof, I guess, all the subgenres. And so, just in preference, that's what we're going to do. I think it's Breyer's.
A little technical difficulties.
Yeah.
A little communication breakdown.
Breakdown.
Does anybody else hear a weird clipping sound in there?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm hearing it too.
You okay, Bryer?
Yeah, I can't tell if it's me or not.
I don't know.
Yeah. Here, I'll come in again.
Okay.
Okay.
But so to me, the music that I like really starts in the 60s. Starts in the 50s, but I feel like there's a big transition from the 50s to 60s as far as albums go. That 50s is more singles oriented.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about putting out big singles and then you put them on an album. Like I feel like if you go to Elvis, he'll have one like really good single and then a bunch of filler. I don't know. That was my feeling. So that's why I didn't want to start with the 50s. And I thought
I'll say if we were to do the 50s, we would do 50 essentials, 50 essential singles.
Songs of the 50s.
Yeah. Even the early 60s were like that, where like bands like the Hollies or whatever would have like a really great single and then like have like 13 or 12 like other songs that are just not as strong.
Well, think about what's going on in the 50s and the early 60s. You got the jukebox as king, and what's the jukebox filled with? 45 RPM singles.
Yeah.
So if you want to be popular with the kids, then you're going to have to release a lot of good singles so they'll spend their hard-earned nickels in the jukebox for your single.
Okay.
Or if you want to go out and buy the single yourself. I feel like LPs were more for classical aficionados who wanted to hear like a whole symphony at one time, or people who, I don't know, it was from the LPs were more for the rich people, and so like the common people were just buying the 45s and the 50s.
Yeah.
Starting in the 60s, however, and like kind of more once you hit 1965, I believe.
Yeah.
Especially with the Beatles' Rubber Soul release.
Yeah.
People start looking more into the LP as a medium of this isn't just a collection of, oh, here's our latest singles plus other songs if you want to hear them. it's like this is meant to be listened to as a whole. It's
Exactly.
a art in itself. We can use it to tell a story or talk about different themes.
Mm-hmm.
Or even just like have a bunch of songs that sound really good together.
Yeah, exactly what I was thinking. 60s is kind of the first decade that really spends more time on making a great album. So if we're going to talk about great albums, to me, the 60s is the best place to start, where you really see that molded anyway. So that's why I want to do the 60s. But my idea is, when I first thought of this idea, I was thinking like, okay, I was going to come up with like 25 essential albums of the 60s that if someone came to me and said, hey, what should I listen to? I could say, okay, here's 25 albums I would recommend. And more I thought about it, more I thought, man, there's more than 25 great albums in the decade. So then that's why I decided like I should move it up to 50. I thought, which I think is a pretty good number, to be honest, to cover a lot of the great music of the 60s. And then I thought, why just do it by myself? Why not bring in Garrett, Nick, and Bryer? I feel like four brains are better than one. Four of us have, like I said, enough knowledge, I think. Even though we're kind of young, maybe, in some ways, I think there's a lot of knowledge between the four of us and of the different decades, especially 60s, that we could come together and put our heads together and come up with 50 essential albums that we would recommend this to anybody that is not familiar with 60s music, I guess, and say, here are the, like I said, the rock, pop, folk, and all those genres that would fit in the 60s, which is becoming very popular in the 60s, of course. That's kind of what dominates, I would say, the 60s music, in my opinion, but that's just me. But anyway, so that's the idea behind the whole thing. And so we're going to go around and each pick like an album to put on the list. And then we're just going to keep going around until we get to the 50, basically. And we're going to start with Nick, first pick, and then go to Garrett, then Bryer, then myself, and kind of go in that order. And so before we start this, before Nick starts his first pick, I also wanted him to maybe kind of describe, summarize what the 60s are in music.
Okay. So the 60s basically started off with, rock and roll started off, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and you have like different bands like, and then there's Muddy Waters and all that, like blues. And you have like these young guys like the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the Hollies, and all. Well, Buddy Holly was another big influence on music. And like, you just have all these like these great like 50s artists going to 60s, and you got these British young guys like influenced by that. And of course the Beatles releases their amazing debut album, Please Please Me, and that changes everything. You have a bunch of these British artists coming out, like the Kinks, the Hollies, Rolling Stones, the Who, the Small Faces. There's like so much British invasion artists. I'm currently building a big collection of that. And then like in the middle of the 60s, like 65, 66, that's when bands like the Byrds came around. It was like, hey, Britain isn't only the big hype for young bands. Yeah. And Byrds kind of like spread that. Then like bands like the Loving Spoonful, Mamas and Papas, The Association, just a bunch of these great young American bands coming out. It's like, hey, our country could also make great music. And I always loved that. And then like coming around like 66, 67, that's when psychedelia came.
Everything changed with that year.
Yeah. That's when the Beatles released their seminal album Revolver. Tomorrow Never Knows, big changer for music. Of course afterwards, Beatles made Sgt. Pepper's, which obviously is going to be in this list somewhere or another.
Yeah.
You can't have 50 Essentials albums and not have Sgt. Pepper's in it. And that changes everything. And of course there was Pet Sounds, which came before it. Brian Wilson listened to the U.S. Rubber Soul, which, yes, in the U.S., these British albums were getting basically mutilated from the U.S., taking, a bunch of the songs off, putting the hit single on it at least, and then releasing it. And Rubber Soul was one of them. They took out a bunch of tracks and all that. But Brian Wilson listened to the Rubber Soul and was like, wow, this is perfect. We got to make something better than this. And then
because it's like a folk rock album.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then he made Pet Sounds, and then Paul McCartney listened to it, was like, wow, this is amazing. This is perfect. I got to top that. And he made Sgt. Pepper's, and then Brian Wilson tried topping Sgt. Pepper's with the Smile album, which sadly never was released. And then
If the 2011 Smile Sessions were to count as a 60s album, I would have put it in, but it's not because it was released in 2011. So
Right.
Yeah.
unfortunately, Smile is not going to be on. It would have totally been on my list if it was released in the 60s,
Okay.
but since it got shelved and was released in 2011, it's unfortunately not going to be. It's an honorable mention, though.
Okay.
Then, of course, in the mid to late 60s, you have all these concerts like the Monterey Pop Festival, Woodstock, Give Me Shelter, I think was the Rolling Stones one, where I think Stone was murdered in that concert. Very tragic.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course, in the background of Jason's video, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, that's when supergroups started to came out. Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Cream with Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker, and Jack Bruce. That's like more late 60s, though. Well, Cream formed in 66, but that's when you started getting supergroups. And, you know, I always thought supergroups are cool, you know, take like a bunch of like these great guys and like form a band and see where that goes. You know, of course, Peace and Love, you know, hippies came around, you know, Vietnam War, of course, came around, you know, for what it's worth. Fortunate Son by CCR came out. Big change.
Yeah.
69. There's just a bunch of stuff that was going on in the 60s, and you know, of course, Motown in the early 60s, and then you know, with Temptations and the Four Tops and all that. I don't have any of those albums on my list, sadly.
Yeah.
But, definitely can't let those go unnoticed. You know, the Supreme, Temptations, Four Tops, you know, Stevie Wonder.
Another honorable mention to little Stevie Wonder, who released his Uptight album and I Was Made to Love Her albums in the 60s, which are both really good.
Mm-hmm. And
now 70s, Stevie Wonder's definitely getting a place on that list. But
yeah, I have a couple of Stevie Wonder albums like drafted for those for 1970s.
Oh,
but, yeah, that's pretty much a good summary of the 60s, though.
That's
starts
great.
off as a singles game in the early 60s, and then you started getting a little ambitious with the albums, and then it starts getting really creative, and then, of course, the 60s end, and, you know, then the 70s come in.
Yeah, and I would add, like, also you got the drug culture and the hippie culture.
Oh, yeah, that bleeds into the music a lot.
And affecting the music in a way,
Yeah, very much so.
It either affects the lyrics or the sound. Like, What's in the Sky with Diamonds? John Lennon is very clear about when he writes songs about drugs. He said that was about a drawing his son Julian did, but the music is still very drug influenced.
Exactly. But yeah, that's a great summary of the 60s, I would say. So Nick, you get to pick first.
Okay, great. I before I begin, I asked the three guys. I'm like, hey, what do you think my first album?
Yeah, what was your first album?
I think I know.
I'm gonna have joking with mine.
If I would say three of you guys got really good guesses. Soundlab, you had close on the album choice. Jason, you got close with the artist.
Yeah.
Bryer, you got the reward for having the funniest comment.
What did Bryer say again?
Very, very essential.
The Holly sing Dylan.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, my number one pick for my first pick is going to be Electronic Sound by George Harrison. Just kidding.
Oh, you had me. Oh.
Heinz baked beans.
This is my absolute favorite album of all time.
Okay.
I love this record to death. I made it no secret to anyone that this is my absolute favorite. Of course, Armenia, City in the Sky, very crazy song. I love the song to death. I'm not going to go too in detail because we will be reviewing this album in Garrett's channel soon. So I'm just going to do a quick summary of each song. Heinz Baked Beans is a pretty funny song written by John Entwistle. What's for tea, daughter? Pretty funny. Marianne with the Shaky Hands, a great song. Odorono's amazing. A song about buying deodorant. Tattoos, a great song. Our Love Was has an amazing Jimi Hendrix style guitar in the middle of the song. I love it. I Can See for Miles is the big hit off of the song, off the album. It was released as a single because they didn't know what to release as a single, and they just kind of picked this last minute. And what a great single to release on it. And the beginning guitar riff was inspired by a song by the Hollies called "I Can't Let Go," and then of course Pete Townsend would comment saying this is the most rough and dirtiest song we ever released. And then of course Paul McCartney took that personally. He was like, I'm going to release Helter Skelter on the White Album. And that basically opens up the gates of heavy metal as it was. So someone's going to mention it when they put what the White Album on the list, because it's going to be somewhere in this list, but I'm not going to go too much in detail. And I Can't Reach You is a great song with a really funny intro with the Charles Atlas with dynamic tensions. Will make you beast of a man. And then Medak, which Keith Moon is putting on his face. And then Relax, which is one of my favorite Who songs. Silas Stingy, which is a great Entwistle song. Sunrise, which has grown on me significantly. I love that song now. And Ray L, which is, to me, the perfect closer to a perfect album.
What I love about that album is all of the funny little radio commercials on the album. It's like, it feels like you've stepped back in time and you're listening to the radio in the 1960s every time I listen to that album.
I love that concept of pirate radio, because that was a...
Oh yeah, this was the Who's first concept album, and they made another one, which I'll probably be mentioning. I might be the one to mention that one later. Nick might steal it first, but that's definitely spoiler alert on my list later. But the first album I'm going to choose is probably the most obvious album. Somebody has to talk about this album, and it's going to be me, because this is probably a tie for my favorite album of all time between this and another album by the same band, but I'm going to go with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. That was the very first record I ever got. Before, I'd only listened to greatest hits compilations. I had no idea what albums were, or I knew what they were, but I kind of saw music more as a bunch of singles on the album. Because like my mom was always like, oh, if you want to buy a CD, you got to buy a greatest hits, because you want to get all good songs and no songs you've never heard of before. So now that changed when I was 17 and I got this Sgt. Pepper record, put it on. My mind was completely blown away. My first thought was, what the heck have I just listened to? This is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. But that was the only record I had, and I love the way that the record sounded as opposed to streaming. So I just played it over and over again, kept listening to it, and it completely changed my perception on music. So that's one of the reasons it's one of my favorite albums of all time, if not my favorite album of all time. Even more so back in the 1960s, whenever you think of what music sounded like before this album came out, this album sounded like aliens had made it whenever it came out. Some of the Beatles' best stuff on here are like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and A Day in the Life. I love the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band song at the beginning, the introduction song, and it's got Ringo's best song, A Little Help from My Friends. Lots of great and weird production choices from George Martin here, like in It's Getting Better, where he's basically banging on the inside of a piano with a hammer to make that intro chord. And then you've got like Animal Noises and Good Morning, which was inspired by Pet Sounds. Lots of tape manipulation, speeding stuff up and slowing stuff down to make their voices sound either higher or lower. You got the weird, The Benefit of Mr. Kite song, where they basically recorded a bunch of carnival noises, cut the tapes up, threw them in the air, stuck them back together, and like it's just a random order of what those carnival noises are. You got George Harrison's Indian Eastern music tribute with Within You Without You. And I've already mentioned A Day in the Life earlier, but I'm going to mention it again. Yeah. That song is absolutely incredible with that orchestra crescendo and kind of the two different sections, each written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, that just perfectly complement each other. And that amazing piano chord at the end that just goes on forever. And you can hear Ringo, like his shoe squeaking away from the drum set because they turned the mics up so hot to get that chord to last so long. Anyway, this is definitely an essential album of the 1960s and one that definitely belongs in any 1960s collection.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my favorite Beatles song on it, Within You Without You.
Yeah, you can't be with Sgt. Pepper's.
Also, if you have not heard the mono version of Sgt. Pepper's, you haven't heard it yet. Then
Yeah.
John Lennon famously said that.
George
but
Martin, I think.
or George Martin. Well, it was either John Lennon or George Martin. But they spent a lot of like several weeks mixing the mono version. They spent like 2 days mixing the stereo version. So if you're gonna listen to this album, you can find a mono copy from the US for pretty cheap, like $25-$30, or listen to the Giles Martin remix that came out in 2017 because it's a lot closer to the mono version than the original stereo mix.
Okay.
I am an
After
audio
listening to the
nerd.
mono version, I never listened to the stereo version again.
No, me neither. I'm an audio nerd, and so I can pick up on some of the differences. Like most people might not even be able to pick up on the differences, but like for me, the tape manipulation on "She's Leaving Home" in the mono version puts it up in a higher key and it sounds better. Some of the little nuances, like the chicken noise on "Good Morning, Good Morning" that morphs into the guitar being slightly different. Paul McCartney's scatting, like the at the end of the Sgt. Pepper reprise being louder on the mono version.
Not that, but a little bit of a false start on the reprise too. It's like do.
Oh yeah, yeah.
On the stereo version, it's just like do, and then it's like it's just like a little bit of a tiny bit of a false start on the mono version. I thought that was cool. And Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is like
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is the best on it because of the flanging effect on the vocals makes it way more trippy. Anyway, that's just my note. If I'm talking about an album in the 60s, pre-1968, I'll specify whether I like the mono or the stereo version better, just because I'm an audio nerd.
For the Who Sell Out album, I'd say listen to the stereo version.
Oh, most definitely.
The mono version, especially on Odo Rono, it's like, I don't know, Odo Rono.
Oh yeah, no extra guitar. Our Love Was has a different guitar solo that's not as good. Yeah, I agree with you, Nick.
It's just a lot better in stereo. That's like one of the rare cases. That's like very few cases pre like 1968 albums that I prefer the stereo version. That album, Our Experience, like Garrett mentions to me, and Disraeli Gears by Cream. That's another album that is much better in stereo.
All right.
We're moving on to Bryer.
Bryer?
All right. So
your first pick.
Yeah. So Garrett just talked about probably the most popular, most well-known 60s album. So I'll go with possibly the second one. I don't know, it's up there. So this is one of my favorite albums of all time, and I'm glad I get to showcase this one because it's definitely up there. It's like definitely top 10, maybe top 5, somewhere around there. So we gotta go Beach Boys.
Oh yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I knew that was gonna be in there.
Yeah.
My third favorite album of all time.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. Like, I mean, when I first heard this completely blew my mind when I first heard it. Like, just the musicianship on here is just absolutely spectacular on here. All composed by Brian Wilson. I mean, when people say Brian Wilson was a genius, this is usually the prime example of why that is.
Oh yeah.
Because, by this point, he was not really touring with the band. He decided to stay and just focus on the writing while the other members went out on tour. And yeah, even though the album didn't do that well initially because it was just so different from what people were used to from the Beach Boys, but over time it has been regarded as this classic and again one of the greatest albums ever made. I mean, it still has a lot of those Beach Boys trademarks. You got the harmonies, which absolutely sound gorgeous here. Of course, it starts out with "Wouldn't It Be Nice," which Brian wanted it to just make a song about pure joy, and that song really feels so happy. So you just can't help put a smile on your face when you hear that song. Then you go to "You Still Believe in Me," a nice slower song, which is absolutely great. The ballads on here are top notch. This is why I love ballads. That's Not Me is great. Then it goes to "Don't Talk," another great slow ballad, which I love. And it has a couple instrumentals. Now, I'm known for not liking where albums have like random instrumentals in a vocal album. But this is another one of those rare exceptions. Like "Let's Go Away for a While" was a great instrumental. I really love how that one sounds. Then you have "Sloop John B," which is a cover, which was suggested by Al Jardine, and that's become very memorable on its own as well. then you have probably the greatest song on here, which is, of course, God Only Knows.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just a gorgeous song. I mean, Paul McCartney says it's the greatest song he ever heard, and
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have, I know there's an answer, which was originally a more drug song, but they had to change some of the lyrics because of it. Here Today's great. I just wasn't made for these times. That song, I relate to that song so much in high school. So that one has a special place in my heart. Then you have the second instrumental, which is not as good as Let's Go Away for a While, but it has its moments. And then it closes out with another standout ballad, which is Caroline No.
Yeah, great.
It's just a great way to close out. And you hear the train at the very end with some dogs. So it's fantastic. And I play this. The reason why this also has a special place in my heart is because during high school, I was in drama class, and I was at that level where I was like one of the more advanced students. And one of these kind of your final assignment was to direct a one-act play. So I had to direct one. And the thing is, during that time, I was listening to the sessions to Pet Sounds, just hearing how Brian Wilson was conducting, how he was directing the whole thing. Like you hear how precise he wanted everything to be. And I'm hearing these session tapes, and I'm like, I want to be that when I direct something. Like, just know everything and just be confident with everything. And that's kind of what the approach I did with the one-act play I directed. So yeah, this album is just so, I hold this album near and dear to my heart. So definitely quintessential when it comes to the 60s, and really, to me, the best Beach Boys album. And yeah, that's my first pick.
Yeah, great pick. I would say like the two most famous albums I want to say is like Sgt. Pepper's and Pet Sounds. I mean, that's a lot of times on lists, that's your 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But any list you make up. I mean, I have somebody who's been commenting, so I want to highlight. It says Smile album wasn't as good as Pet Sounds, in my opinion, which I would say,
I agree.
Not very much as good as Pet Sounds.
Bryer, Nick, and I did a Beach Boys ranking video, and we all had Pet Sounds higher than Smile.
Yeah. I nothing beats Pet Sounds as far as the Beach Boys go.
No.
I picked 2020 over that, but
also, I like Rubber Soul probably more than the Sgt. Pepper's, which Rubber Soul is an amazing album as well. Paul dominates Sgt. Pepper's, which I totally agree. To me,
when Paul is your favorite Beatle, though.
Paul, that's his genius, is that album. I mean, he really made that album. He came up with the concept and everything. He says, everything is better in stereo to me. We wonder if Keith M is Keith Moon. That's a question right now. Does Keith Moon come from the dead to comment on our video? Hey, The Who made it already on an album. So. Mike Love contributed lyrics as well as Tony Asher on some of the songs at Pet Sounds.
That's true. Of course, it took a while for him to get the credit.
Really?
Yeah. That's why Mike Love sued Brian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Says, I heard Brian wanted to write a teenage symphony to God.
Yeah, that was this concept for Smile.
that was the Our Prayer song.
Okay. I guess it's not Keith Moon. Too bad. That would have been a great get. My first album, I'm gonna go with my favorite album of the 1960s, and from my favorite band of all time, and that is Revolver from the Beatles. This came out in 1966, and if you're gonna know one thing, the Beatles are gonna dominate my list for sure, as maybe your guys as well. It's hard you can't just put one album from the Beatles on this list. There's several that you have to listen to, I think. And this is one of them. It's somewhat of a change in the Beatles, and it's kind of the middle period, I would say, kind of getting to late period Beatles. And it's definitely a change from the earlier part where it's more the pop rock type, singing about love and, the teeny bopper type days, to then they kind of hit like more of folk rock in the Help and Rubber Soul time. And then when they come to Rubber Soul, they're kind of delving into psychedelic music. I would say this or Sgt. Pepper's, you can argue maybe is the best psychedelic album of all time. I think. I can't remember which one. I know they did a poll one time of the best psychedelic album. I can't remember what one. Revolver, I know, was pretty high on that list if it didn't win. Because you do, like Nick said, you get Tomorrow Never Knows, maybe the greatest psychedelic rock song of all time. And you're getting backwards guitars. You're getting all kinds of sound effects into the music. You're getting more, you're getting into more orchestra music and horns and stuff like that. I mean, Eleanor Rigby is all orchestra music because, like, there's no guitar or anything in it. And it's absolutely beautiful. The music is a little bit heavier. Taxman, And Your Bird Can Sing, She Said. The music definitely getting heavier as far as guitars go and bass. The bass, Paul just like steps it up as a bass player, and it's like I consider one of the best bass players of all time because of this period. He just like, okay, I'm gonna make the bass like the best instrument, and just absolutely kills it on these songs. And it's such a cool variety album where you get these psychedelic heavy songs. You get a great ballad like Here, There, and Everywhere, probably the best love ballad of all time, piano ballad for Paul. You get a kid song, Sergeant Yellow Submarine. I mean, it doesn't seem to fit in this album, but yeah, I enjoy that song as well. And it's obviously one of Ringo's big songs. But yeah, this is just top to bottom. I love every song on this album, and it's an absolute masterpiece. So that's my pick.
My problem is that like everybody seems to put Revolver as their number one album, and for me, it's like number 3 or 4 rather than number 1. Like still a fantastic album. There's just 2 or 3 I like more than it.
Sure.
My favorite Beatle album always changes. My ranking with Garrett, I put Abbey Road, but I'm trying to lean towards Revolver again. But yeah, it's weird. My album ranking's always changing. Like in the video, I had Sgt. Pepper's at number 8, but now it's at number 4. So it's always constantly
that's
changing.
a much better ranking for Sgt. Pepper's.
It's always changing though. So one day the White Album's gonna be at like number 4, like, or number 3. Next day it's gonna be at like number 7, number 7 or number 6. So
that's what happens when you write as many good albums as the Beatles.
Yep. Speaking of a great album by a great band, Garrett, you were the closest. Ogden Snuck on Flake. This is not my original pressing. I don't want to break it any more than I already did. This is my repressing that I bought at a record store for only $20. And
your display copy.
Yep, my display copy basically. And it's a wonderful album. My second favorite band of all time, the Small Faces. They started off as a really great mod group, and then they started diving into psychedelia like the Who did. And of course, the title track, Ogden Snuck on Flake, an amazing instrumental. Jason's favorite song on the album, Afterglow, which I agree, it's definitely up there. What an amazing song. What a great vocal song to start off the album. Then, of course, Long Goes and Worlds Apart, which is sung by Ian McGuigan. Really great song. Rainy, really funny British sounding song. She's Rainy, the darkest delight. Really funny. Song of a Baker, which is an amazing song, really heavy. Then, of course, the very funny song at the end of the first side, Lazy Sunday. Wouldn't it be nice to get on with me neighbors? Very great song. Happiness Stand, which opens up side 2, is the beginning of the Happiness Stand. The 6 songs about Happiness Stand, finding the other half of the moon.
And Angley.
Hover with the British comedian, which I never remember the name of, but look him up if you want to. And he narrates between each song, and it's pretty funny. There is one part that always gets me, the hover, very funny.
Yeah.
And then Rolling Over, which is their most Small Faces song, which I like that a lot. Hungry Intruder's great, which is a co-lead vocal with Ronnie Lane and Steve Marriott. Ronnie Lane's supposed to be taking place as the Fly, and Steve Marriott's supposed to be Happiness Stand, which I think is cool. The Journey's really good. Mad John's amazing, and Happy Days 2010 is very funny and goofy.
Life is just a bowl of all bran.
Yeah, it just starts off with that. But if anyone wants to ever buy a copy of this record, get this. It's great. Has the circle.
Yeah.
Doesn't have all of them. It only comes off as like a gatefold. But it's good for anyone who wants to collect the record.
Yeah.
And it comes with different pictures on the original copy, but it shows it here in different colors, which is cool.
Nick, do you like the mono or the stereo version of Ogden's
I
Gunflake?
prefer the stereo version. Mono version, like both versions, you could go either way. Like one's not like way better than the other, but if I had to pick a version, I'd say the stereo version. Just
Me too. It's Kenny Jones's drum rolls that like circle around your head that make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want a drummer that sounds almost like Keith Moon, Kenny Jones is a great drummer. And Garrett brought to my attention that he was Keith Moon's replacement on the 1980's Who albums. And his drumming wasn't as perfect on those albums, but still, what a great replacement for Keith Moon. He's like the most Keith Moon sounding drummer.
Yeah.
Pete Townsend loves the small faces. He's like one of the few bands that Pete Townsend actually compliments. I remember I bought a remaster of the 67 album and their Arbor Small Faces record, and there was a little caption by Pete Townsend. It was like, "Oh, this is some great music," and I'm like, that's interesting. Pete Townsend compliments an artist. That's rare. So if Pete Townsend says it's great music, it's great music. So
yeah. All right. So now we go to Garrett, your second pick.
Okay, my second pick is going to be the most underrated album of the 1960s. I'm going to 1968 with the Zombies, Odyssey and Oracle album. I love this album from the first time I heard it. This album is absolutely amazing, and I may get some controversy for saying this, but I think it's better than a lot of the Beatles albums. It's an absolutely incredible record. It sounds like the Beatles could have written it. But you start off with this amazing song, the Carousel 44, which has, like, this album is drenched in Mellotron. And it's the same Mellotron that was used on Strawberry Fields Forever. But the Mellotron just adds a new layer to this album because it sounds like you can use like strings or like a flute or something, but it's a keyboard. It came out in the 60s. And on this Carousel 44 song, like that mixed with the piano, and that's all Rod Argent, who is the keyboardist for the Zombies. He's my favorite member of the Zombies, but really good at playing the piano and just adding another texture to the music. And then there's a Rose for Emily, which sounds like it could have been written by Brian Wilson. I'm saying the names of other people, but like this was all Rod Argent and Colin Blunstone, Chris White. Those are all the geniuses behind this band. Beechwood Park, Brief Candles, really great. Hung Up on a Dream is incredible. I love the guitar solo in that. And then there's this really weird, moody song called The Butcher's Tale, which kind of talks about World War I and kind of the horrors of war. And there's I Want Her, She Wants Me, and This Will Be Our Year. And then, of course, you've got The Time of the Season, which was the big hit on this album.
So good.
It's just such a good album. I had never heard it before because it's a really underrated album from the 60s. Didn't sell well at all when it came out. But I heard it was, I think either Sam St. John or Glenn Kellaway from The Basement. One of them were talking about this album. I gave it a listen, and I was not disappointed at all.
Sam St. John has it really high on his list of top albums. It's in his top 10.
Oh, it's probably in my top 15, 20 albums of all time.
Yeah. It's great album. We talked about it on your channel some months ago. Such a good album. All right, so we go to Bryer for your second pick.
Right. Let's see. Which one do I want to go first? I'll go with this one first. I'm probably the biggest fan of this band. I think Nick might also be a fan. But I'm going to go with The Doors with their self-titled debut.
Break on through to the other side.
There you go. That's it. I'm just going to break it through. So, yeah. All right. So, yeah. Jim Morrison, Ray Manzarek, John Densmore, and Robbie Krieger. definitely one of the biggest psychedelic bands of that period. I mean, this definitely is their more psychedelic album. Well, Strange Days is probably even more psychedelic, but
Strange Days is weird.
Yeah, so this has more. This is kind of more bluesy. You hear a bit more jazz influence on here because John Densmore was a jazz drummer originally, so he definitely brings that to the table. And even Ray Manzarek was also kind of a jazz influence to his keyboard playing. But yeah, it starts out with "Break On Through," a big song. Of course, originally didn't do that well. But it's funny because there's the part when he says she gets high, and if you ever hear this on the radio, they cut out the high parts, so it's just she get.
Or if you get an original record, original record from 1967, it's going to sound like that.
Yeah, and they still.
I think it's kind of funny.
Day. Yeah, they still do it to this day. But yeah, still a great song, great opening track. Then you have Soul Kitchen, which is again you hear a lot of the keyboard playing on here. The Crystal Ship. It's pretty good. Not kind of a slower song. Then you have 20th Century Fox, which is pretty cool. Then you have Alabama song Whiskey Bar, which is kind of taken from this like old timey 1800 like music number. It's kind of interesting they brought it to this album, but they do a pretty good job on it. They really make it their own. And then the next song, which is probably their most well-known song, which is Light My Fire.
Amazing.
Then it starts out with that iconic keyboard intro, and then Jim Morrison comes in with the vocals, and there's the single, and then there's the full version where the single is like they cut out that whole like almost like 3 or 4 minute music solo. But every member gets a chance to shine on it in that solo, and that's why I prefer the full version, because every member gets to shine. Because Ray has his keyboard solo, then of course you have Robbie Krieger with his kind of guitar solo. And then John Densmore's kind of holding it all together. It's a classic song. Then you have Backdoor Man, where Jim is just going all out on that song. So he's just screaming his head off on that one, which is kind of funny. I Look at You is good. End of the Night, another atmospheric, slower psychedelic number. Take It As It Comes is good. And then it closes out with the 11-minute epic, The Ends. I mean,
The End.
What perfect song to close out with The End.
Oh, man.
It's this long, this like very almost kind of creepy song, especially especially in the beginning of, if you watch Apocalypse Now, there's a reason why they use that song. But yeah, it's just, there's a whole funny story with this song when they first performed it live, because if you remember in the song, there's this whole like Jim Morrison goes kind of off rail with this bizarre poem.
Oh yeah, it was a reference to Greek literature, Oedipus Rex.
Because the thing is, originally that wasn't part of the song, but one day when they were going to perform it live, Jim was late. They didn't know where he was, so they went to his hotel room. They found him high off his mind.
Sure.
And so they quickly brought him back, and so it started off okay, but then by the time they got to the end, that's kind of where Jim just improvised this weird monologue, and they liked it so much they kept it for the studio. And so it's kind of funny. So yeah, I mean the subject matter is not funny, but it's kind of funny. But it just closes out in the very appropriate way, especially in terms of the Doors. So
that's another thing that's different. If you have the original copy on record, is they take out the because there's this part where he's like cussing to keep time.
Yeah,
they take out the cussing on the original. Like it wasn't there until the 80s when that movie you were talking about, Apocalypse Now. They like remixed the song for that movie specifically because they found out that vocal line was buried in the mix because the producers didn't want the cussing on the 1960s.
Yeah, and it's back on this 2006 remaster. So yeah, but yeah, that's the Doors. Not everyone's cup of tea, I'm assuming, but I like
my favorite Doors album is from the 70s, so we'll get to that maybe in the 70s. I think my favorite member is probably Ray Manzarek because, and this is coming from a guitar player, but his keyboards really make their sound, especially Riders on the Storm. I love that song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's funny. My least favorite song by them is "The End." I put a community post with my ranking of the Doors, like Morrison songs, like the ones before he passed away, because not many people are too interested in the albums after him. They're good, they're decent, but I usually rank them on the lower side. And my favorite Doors album in the '60s, which it's not going to be my Essentials albums list, because even though it's my favorite Doors album, I wouldn't consider it to be an essential album of the '60s, and that would be Soft Parade.
Yeah, no, you have to have the Doors. That's I had that so far. Every album we talked about, it's on my list somewhere, so I have to, keep track and cross them out as I go. These are all definitely good albums, and Doors definitely. Keith says Revolver was too experimental for me, especially John songs, and the Revolver is definitely where they got way more experimental with their music, and it gets even more as the album goes on.
Magical Mystery Tour is a trip for sure.
And White Album, you have Revolution 9. I mean, it's just out of this world or experimental music, which makes me think maybe you like the earlier Beatles, like the 64, 65 Beatles, which is great too. It's less experimental and just really great. A lot of great songs, catchy music, which I love as well. And we'll probably talk about that. Says I prefer the Beatles The End on Abbey Road. And
Me too.
I was thinking the same thing. Like the Beatles have
That's amazing guitar solos from each Beatle. So besides Ringo, of course, but you get the idea.
Gets a little drum solo in there. But
It's a drum solo though.
All right, my second pick is I was hoping I'd get this album because I think I'm the biggest fan of this album out of us, and that is Crosby, Stills and Nash, which is by the Crosby, Stills and Nash, the same name as the album. This is their debut album, came out in 1969, and this is an album that we've covered on Soundlab Studios channel not that long ago.
Great video, go check it out.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And if you watch that, you'll see how much I love that album. And it's probably my favorite non-Beatle album of the 60s. So that's why I have to put it here. Like I said, Beatles really dominate my 60s, but Crosby, Stills, Nash, I absolutely love. I saw them in concert back in 2005. It was a great concert. One of the most memorable concerts I've ever had. And this album is almost like a greatest hits of Crosby, Stills, Nash. I mean, there's a good 5-6 songs. I feel like or I don't know, something like that. 4 or 5 songs that you could put on a greatest hits album. They start with Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, my favorite all time Crosby, Stills, Nash song. Absolutely amazing, epic. Helplessly Hoping. Personally, I love that song. That's one of my favorite songs. I won't say who doesn't like that song as much as me, but I've heard some people don't like that song as much as I do, but
a couple.
But you got Wooden Ships, absolutely great. Marrakesh Express. I mean, it's what's so great, significant about this album is you got 3 members from 3 Hall of Fame bands. I mean, the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, the Hollies, and these are 3 major members of those 3 bands. They come together to form, in my opinion, the greatest supergroup of all time. You can put Cream in there, you can put Traveling Wilburys in there, but to me, Crosby, Stills, Nash is my favorite super kind of group, which is a crazy thing to think of, like these great members of these bands coming together and forming this absolutely amazing band. And if you like, to me, this is, I would say, like folk rock style music. If you like that kind of music, if you like harmonies, this is the album for you because the harmonies are amazing, the songwriting, instrumentally, it's just top notch in my opinion. And again, it's one of those albums where I like every song on it. And there's a couple of just absolute amazing songs of all time. So yeah, it has to be on the list.
Definitely. And it's behind you right now. And
it's behind me. That's why I put it behind me. I thought, I'm pretty sure I'll cover this song on my list.
Yeah, once we get to the 70s, I'm going to be mentioning their second album with Neil Young, Deja Vu, because as of right now, it's my favorite 70s album, so very excited for that. Yeah. But as for my third album for my Essentials album list, We Are the Village Green Preservation Society by the Kinks. And they kind of went through the same thing where the Beatles went, where they started off as just, just great rock songs, and then they kind of just evolved as they went on. And this is their magnum opus. Of course, a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, of course you said Kinks Preservation Society album. Why didn't you put that Pete Townsend sounded like album Soap Opera on there? That's the real Kinks." Well, whoever says that, it doesn't matter. Of course, everyone's entitled to their own opinion.
Right.
But of course, we start off with an amazing track. Well, this is gonna be another album we're gonna be reviewing on Garrett's channel, so I'm gonna try not to go too in detail. The Village Green, of course, the title track that I was just singing, love it. You Remember Walter is a great song. Picture Book is really good. Johnny Thunder is really good. Last of the Steam Powered Trains is really good. It's a very CCR-esque track. Big Sky's brilliant. Sitting by the Riverside's also brilliant. Animal Farm is amazing. Village Green, oh my god, one of my favorite songs on the albums.
That's my favorite song on the album.
I could definitely see why. Starstruck is amazing. It was released as a single. Phenomenal Cat, which has that Mellotron, I think, from Strawberry Fields Forever with the. I can't mimic it, but if you listen to it, you'll know what I'm talking about. All My Friends Were There is a nice song. Wicked Annabelle is a very dark song for them. It's like they do very little psychedelic songs, but when they do it really good. And Wicked Annabelle is a good example of that. Monica is pretty fun, and People Take Pictures of Each Other is amazing. And the concept of the album is supposed to look back, like it's supposed to be like a nostalgic album, and they do an incredible job. Well, Ray Davies does an incredible job, like writing these songs, and just even though I don't remember, of course, I can't remember stuff that never happened to me, but I could just imagine what goes on in these songs, and I quite like it. It's really good. And I have food with me, and I'm going to turn off my camera and mute my microphone, but I am still watching, and once it gets back to me, I'll unmute and all that stuff. But just want to let you guys know that, so you guys aren't like, "Oh, Nick's leaving," and then I come back and it's like, "Okay," and then it happens again. It's like, "Oh, Nick's leaving again." But yeah, just wanted to let you guys know that. But my number 3 spot, Village Green.
All right, good.
You guys can probably guess what's going to be next for me. What would you think I would pick next?
Abbey Road? I don't know.
I'll probably go with that. Maybe the Stones. Something from the Stones.
I would have. Okay, I'm thinking. Abbey Road is my favorite album of all time, but it's such a big album that somebody's already had it on their list. I'm trying to go with albums that maybe aren't by the Beatles, because I know you guys are all going to pick Beatles albums. So I'm going to go 1969 Led Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin 2.
That was my third.
Led Zeppelin's first album from 1969.
Oh, the first album. Yeah, that's right.
Crazy good debut album. Good Times, Bad Times. What a way to start your career. Baby, I'm Gonna Leave You. Amazing acoustic number. Dazed and Confused. Really great blues. And then How Many More Times, the album closer, is insane. Communication Breakdown. Like, just the musicianship on this album, the drumming from John Bonham, the guitar, the bass, and then like Robert Plant's vocals are just out of this world on this album. It's like taking the blues and cranking it up to 12.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be a little more brief with my album descriptions so that we can get, because there's 50 albums on this list.
So did they have 2 albums that year?
Yes, 1 and 2.
Okay.
Just a few months apart from each other.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, Bryer.
All right. So so we already talked about the Beatles a little bit, so might as well talk about the bad boy version of them. That's what the manager said. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the Rolling Stones, and I had to go with probably my favorite one of the Rolling Stones. I'm sure. I mean, there's other pretty good albums they released in the '60s. Maybe one of us will bring up another one, but I'm probably
gonna pick another one from them in a few minutes.
So I'm gonna go with my personal favorite, and that is Let It Bleed. And I even have the vinyl copy. Look at me. But yeah, as I was saying, so yeah, this is my favorite Rolling Stones of the '60s. It's probably my second favorite Rolling Stones album in general, but yeah, this has many classics. I'll try to keep this brief as well. Of course, you have "Gimme Shelter," one of the great Rolling Stones songs, definitely a classic, especially with Mary Clayton's backing vocals on that track. Of course, I'm trying to read the track listing, but it's completely out of order. So, oh well. Yes. But the title track's great. "Love in Vain's a good blues number. "Midnight Rambler" is a great.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, another fantastic song. "You Got the Silver" is a great one. That's one you have Keith Richards on lead vocals, and even though Keith Richards is no Mick Jagger, but he definitely has a great voice in his own right, which matches the song very well. Then it closes out with the other pretty well-known song with "You Can't Always Get What You Want." You have you have like a gospel choir in the background, which is just fantastic. "Live With Me" is great. "Monkey Man's" another very great deep cuts. I love the piano in the beginning. It just sounds fantastic. And of course, that's where Mick Jagger gets to kind of vocals. Then you have "Country Honk," which is a not one of my favorite songs on the album.
That's my biggest gripe with that album is why would you put "Country Honk" instead of the single version of "Honky Tonk Women"? If they were to put the single version of "Honky Tonk Women" on that album, it would probably be my favorite Stones album.
Yeah, I probably would agree with that. But I mean, yeah, when it comes to '60s, you have to mention the Rolling Stones, so that's my choice. So yeah, that's my third one.
Yeah, definitely. That was the one I was thinking about when I thought about the Rolling Stones. Live Bleed is probably the biggest one.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, if you put it on the list, that might be most people's pick. So it's pretty good. A lot of my top albums haven't been picked yet, so I got some good ones to pick here. And so my next one, I'm gonna go with "Mr. Tambourine Man" by the Byrds. Came out in 1965. And you have to put this as their debut album, and you have to have this album because it started the whole folk rock genre. I mean, it started a whole genre that was huge in the mid '60s period before psychedelic era kind of came in, maybe took it out. But and like Nick said, I feel like this was like almost like a reply to the Beatle invasion coming in. They took the Beatles music and they took like I think Bob Dylan and they mashed them together, and that's where they came up with this folk rock album. One of my favorite albums of all time. Of course, "Mr. Tambourine Man," the title song, is a great cover song. One of the best cover songs of all time with Bob Dylan. Absolutely love it. It's another band that the harmonies are absolutely amazing. I love bands with harmonies, and they do an amazing job. Of course, as I talked about, Crosby, Stills, and Nash & Young, Dave Crosby's in this band with Roger McGuinn, Clark. Anyways, but you got "The Bells of Rimney," "Chimes of Freedom," also amazing. Every song on here just sounds great because they can make almost any song sound good with those harmonies. Anyways, and it is a great debut album. Yeah, it's a must, I think, of the '60s. So that's my third pick.
Go watch me and Nick's review on that album.
Yes, I was gonna say Nick and Bryer reviewed this.
Yeah, we've been going through their discography, and we have a lot of good things to say about the album. Jason was just saying, and today, a little time after this video, we're gonna be reviewing their Notorious Bird Brothers album, which, it's a great album. But my number 4 pick is gonna be the Hollies album.
All right,
the Evolution album.
Yes, that's a great album.
I have it in this awesome cover, the frame. That's how much I really like the album. I asked for it for Christmas, and it was like in such great condition. I put it in that frame, and it's an amazing album. It's a lot of people. Butterfly is really Graham Nash's masterpiece, but this is like the psychedelia and all that, but like in a great way. It was released the same day as Sgt. Pepper's, June 1st, to be exact. Has my favorite album of all time. This amazing album cover with Tony Hicks like kind of reaching towards you, like
yeah.
Ooh. Trippy.
Hippie.
Then the Heartaches Begin is a great opener. Stop Right There is nice and soft. Water on the Brain is very psychedelic. I love it so much. It's one of my favorites. Lullaby to Tim, which Garrett perfectly describes it. It's like if the fan and you like talk into it, and it's like that effect. After that is Garrett's favorite Holly song, which is "Have You Ever Loved Somebody," which I don't blame him at all. It is amazing. Then "You Need Love" is a great. Sky 2 opens up with "Rain on the Window," which is amazing. "Ready for a Fall" I love so much. "Yield Top Shop" is a great Baroque song. Very Beatlesque. "When Your Lights Turned On" is really great power rock. "Leave Me" is really good, and then it closes off on a really great note. The Games We Play, and if you like Garrett and you just want to listen to, if you want Carrie In on the album, listen to the US version and get that version. That's not a bad way to own the album. I prefer the UK version. This is the UK version. Pardon me. The US version has a different version of that album cover, and it has like featuring Carrie In on it. That's not a bad way to get yourself into the album. It's 10 songs instead of 12 songs, and like I said, I prefer the UK version, but if you prefer the US version, that's good too, because that's a great album, no matter what. And that's my number 4 pick.
All right. I figured Hollies was coming some point.
Yep. I just had to get my 3 favorite albums, and then I include that Hollies album.
I'm going to piggyback off what Bryer was saying with the Rolling Stones, except I'm going to pick the one Rolling Stones album I guarantee none of you other guys have. Because it's the most underrated Rolling Stones album. I'm going to go with 1967's Between the Buttons.
Oh, okay.
It's a very underrated Rolling Stones album. I had it at like number 3 whenever I ranked them all. Because it doesn't sound like any other Rolling Stones album. It's very, very British, because the Rolling Stones are usually more into like, they sound kind of like American rock, even though they're from Great Britain. It's the most British the Stones ever got. Lots of different styles on there too. Like the big single was "Let's Spend the Night Together" and "Ruby Tuesday" it was a double A-sided single, and those singles are on there. If you're listening in the US, I'll say like US or UK version for this. I'm going through the US track listing because that's what I have on my record. But "Ruby Tuesday," one of the great Rolling Stones singles, absolutely amazing. I love the flute on that one. I'm pretty sure Brian Jones was the one who wrote the song. And Mick Jagger's vocal performance on it is very great. And then there's all these other really weird, like, but yet cool songs like "Connection," "She Smiled Sweetly," "Cool, Calm, and Collected," which sounds almost like a music hall song gone horribly wrong with like this frantic honky-tonk piano. And then my favorite song on this album is "Miss Amanda Jones," which is a really underrated Rolling Stones song and one of my favorite Rolling Stones songs, but like nobody's ever heard of it. It's got a really cool guitar part on it. And then you've got "Something Happened to Me Yesterday" closing it off, which is kind of a funny way to end the album. But I do think it is an essential album of the 1960s because it kind of is showing a different side to the Rolling Stones than you might think they would be.
Yeah, a little different than even "Let It Bleed," probably, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to get that for more of the pop side of the Rolling Stones, because other than it, the Between the Buttons album is split up in between pop songs and just rock, not like rock, but like rock and roll, kind of like 1950s style rock and roll with Miss Amanda Jones. So it's kind of a mix of pop and rock and roll rather than the blues rock they're known for on their other albums.
Okay. Yeah, I was expecting you to say "Aftermath" was one.
I'm pretty sure Nick is going to talk about that one later, so I'm going to save that one for him. And for my Stones album, I'm going to pick "Between the Buttons."
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's not one of the ones I think about, but yeah, that's good. All right. So, Bryer. Yeah, you got Bryer next.
All right.
Your 4th.
Okay, so Garrett number 4. So Garrett just talked about poppy Rolling Stones. Well, I'm going to go the exact opposite of pop in general. It's not a poppy album at all, but it's kind of has this great big. It has a pretty good reputation. So the album I'm going to go next is "In the Court of the Crimson King" by King Crimson. Yes. So the thing about the 60s was not only did it start many genres, one of the genres it helps kind of jumpstart was progressive rock. And to many people, King Crimson is the band that truly gave it a great at the start. People have argued that maybe the Moody Blues or the Beatles kind of started progressive rock, but to many music historians, King Crimson were the first real progressive rock band. I mean, there's only 5 songs on this album, but a lot of them can go. Yeah, 5 songs. Yeah, so it starts out with 21st Century Schizoid Man, which is
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it was pretty heavy for its time too.
Yeah.
King Crimson kind of mixed heavy rock with a bit of jazz, a bit of psychedelia as well, and they just put it all together, and you get a lot of this crazy music. So again, when you hear if you haven't heard 21st Century Schizoid Man, you notice Greg Lake, who was the lead singer at the time, his voice had this really harsh distortion on it, which I heard that was by accident, but they kind of liked how it sounded, so they kept it. So that's kind of like the most well-known song, and I think Kanye West even sampled the song as well in one of his songs. So random trivia thing there. But luckily, Greg Lake's vocals aren't always in that distorted style. The rest of the album, he sings more cleanly. It's more clean. So it has "I Talk to the Wind," which is a slower song, and it's a nice, beautiful, very breezy, very relaxing type of song. Then you have Epitaph. Now, if you haven't heard Greg Lake as a vocalist, like check out Epitaph, because he is pouring his heart and soul into that song, and it's just very emotional sounding and just a fantastic song there. It's on the longer side. I think it's like 8 minutes if I remember, but it goes by quickly. Now, Moonchild is probably the most divisive song, because that one is the longest song. I think that's 11 minutes, and half of it's like your traditional song, but then the remaining half is kind of like this kind of elongated jam session where they're kind of noodling, shall we say, which some people like, some people don't. I don't mind it too much, but it does go on for a bit if you're not used to it. And then it closes out with probably the title track, "The Court of the Crimson King," which is a great epic song. It's big sounding, and it's a great way to close it out. And also it has that. And also, last note, it has that iconic album cover, which
very iconic.
Very iconic. You hear it, you see it, and you will never forget this. So
no,
yeah, that's my next pick.
That thing freaks me out.
It freaks me out.
I love it because of it.
Well, it freaks you out in a good way.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, you have to give me the name again, because I couldn't.
The Court of the Crimson King.
The Court?
The Court, in the Court of the Crimson King. Funny enough, the guy who made the album cover, he actually died months later. Oh. And he was young too. He was like still in his 20s or 30s.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an album I've heard people talk about, never listened to it.
Don't know. Jason, you will not like it, Jason.
I know nothing about stuff. When I played Guitar Hero, like the very last song, I think it's Guitar Hero or Guitar Hero 4. The very last song you play is 24, whatever, Schizoid.
21st, yeah. Yes, Schizoid Man, yeah.
21st Century Schizoid, yeah. That's like at the very end, I think, of one of the Guitar Hero. That's how I know that song. And it's a crazy
cool. Yeah.
Anyways, okay, good. Bring something different. Because that's nowhere on my list.
No. I didn't think.
Okay. Well, I feel like it would be a shame not to mention this artist at this point. I feel like we have to talk about this guy. He's the most influential songwriter of the 60s.
I know it's coming.
And that is Bob Dylan. And so I have to go with Highway 61 Revisited.
Oh yeah.
Bob Dylan. You have to have this in top of your list. Came out in 1965. I feel like the significance of this album is it feels like a real transition. Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like a transition from Bob Dylan's folk era of just him, acoustic guitar and a harmonica, to now he's going electric. And that was like a huge shift. In fact, a lot of people were upset in the folk community that he went electric. And I love his earlier stuff, the acoustic stuff, but he also sounds great when he went electric as well. And he still has that great Bob Dylan style. Only Bob Dylan, he just has this unique style to him that only he does when he writes a song. He doesn't write in a traditional sense to me where it's not verse, chorus,
Yeah.
hook. It's like, I'm going to give you like 4 verses and almost no chorus, or I'm gonna give you 10 verses and no chorus or whatever, and it's absolutely amazing. And his voice, he has a terrible vocally, but yet I still enjoy listening to him sing sometimes because it's just uniquely him. But yeah, one of my favorite songs of all time, Like a Rolling Stone, that's the highlight of this album for sure. And what makes it so great, it's one of the great 60s songs. I mean, written musically, amazing song. But I also love Ballad of a Thin Man. Desolation Row closes out the album. They're really long songs that kind of go on and on, but yet they're great. Also love Queen Jane Approximately is a great kind of almost a more pop song comparatively to the other ones, but it's only like 8 songs long or something, but it's definitely one of his masters. He has like, you'd probably say he has like, I don't know, 3 masterpiece albums, and this is one of them, I think. And it's top of most people's list, so you have to have this. Highway 61 Revisited, one of the great folk rock albums.
Hey, do you hear a fan?
I do now.
Yeah, now you.
Okay, because I may have to mute myself in between. I'm getting too hot and I need the fan on, so I'll just mute myself in between when is the fan distorting my voice?
No, not really.
Okay. I've only listened to 2 Bob Dylan albums, but they're both amazing. One of them was Highway 61 and one was Blonde on Blonde, and they're both fantastic albums.
Those are 2, classics.
John Hardy is really good too.
Oh yeah, with the first version of All Along the Watchtower.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, my 5th album. This isn't. Oh, pardon me. Some people might not consider this to be a real album. Like some people might be like, "Oh, it's just a compilation album," but this has enough new music on it for me to consider it to be an album. And Garrett knows what I'm talking about.
It's too much.
Magic Bus.
Magic Bus.
By The Who.
Yeah.
My second favorite Who record, and really, really good. Disguises is amazing in my opinion. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is the B-side of Magic Bus, which I really like. Call Me Lightning is a really great song. Of course, the title track Magic Bus is amazing. Someone's Coming's really good. B-side to I Can See for Miles. Doctor, which is the B-side to Pictures of Lily. And
Pictures of Lily. It's good.
Yep. Bucket Tea, which is great. And so to close out the record, Pictures of Lily. And of course, I didn't mention them yet, but they do have 3 repeat tracks, which does devalue the album a little bit. Does include Run, Run, Run by The Who, and it includes 2 tracks from the Who sellout album, I Can't Reach You, and Our Love Was, Is. And I Can't Reach You, I do like this version better because it gets rid of I like it in the context of the Who sellout album, but when I want to listen to it by itself, I just want to listen to this version. It gets rid of the Charles Atlas section of this track, and I prefer when I just want to listen to just the individual track, but of course, if I'm listening to the Who sellout record, I'm going to listen to the one with Charles Atlas. But yeah, really great album. If you call yourself a Who fan and you just listen to Tommy and Who's Next and Quadrophenia, this album and the Who Salad are 2 albums you should definitely check out right after because they're very essential and essential 60s albums list according to me.
I don't really like that album. Honestly speaking, other than the few, I like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I like Magic Bus.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah, at least you consider it to be a part of their canon. Cause,
I like Someone's Coming because it's funny.
And it's crazy too. Is it's when we were first talking on reactions to the classic. I'm like, do you consider that to be a real Who album? You're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, nice.
I do. However, I'm listening through the Who albums with my roommate, and we're going straight to Tommy.
That makes sense because Tommy, because the Ray L song ends with Captain Walker almost, the story of it.
I feel like you need to listen to that album before Who Sell Out if you're going to include in their canon, because it sounds like a step back. Oh, but you can't because of the 3 Who Sell Outs or the 2 Who Sell Out songs on there.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, I guess I'll just go ahead. I was going to wait one more round before I did this album, but since we already talked about it, I'm going to go with Tommy for my next album.
Okay, yeah.
Kind of the first big rock opera album about this kid who can't see, hear, or speak. But it's not because he can't, it's just because it's all in his head. And it, like, his parents go through all these weird things to try to cure him. It's the 60s, so bear with me because the 60s were weird. But they're, like, given drugs or something. And, like, his cousin is rude to him. We're not going to talk about his uncle. But he has really good power, like, in pinball. Like, he's a really good pinball player. And, like, it's a weird story. But the music is really great. I love the overture, which kind of shows all the themes of the album. The Christmas song, Cousin Kevin. Of course, Pinball Wizard. My favorite song on the album is actually the Doctor's song, Go to the Mirror Boy. That song rocks. It's amazing. I love the ba-da-da-da-do, boom, boom, ba-da-da-da-do, boom, boom. And I love the way that Roger sings that song. Like, she seems to be completely unreceptive. When he's, like, using his... This is the album where Roger found his voice.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
like Roger was singing well before on like My Generation and Who Sell Out, but this is the album where Roger finds his voice, especially on this song here, "Go to the Mirror Boy," because he really starts stepping it up vocally after this. Especially if you check out the Live at Leeds album, which came out right after Tommy. That album is basically the Who does Led Zeppelin kind of before Led Zeppelin was big. I was rewatching my Who ranking video, and in it I said it was the Who out Zeppelin's Led Zeppelin. Now that I've actually listened to Led Zeppelin, I'm not going to hold that opinion anymore. But it at least sounds enough like them on that Live at Leeds album, which may or may not be one of my essential albums of the 1970s, even though it's a live album. But for Tommy, absolutely amazing album. Really unprecedented with the rock opera thing, telling a story with like a complete story with your album. It's meant to be listened to from beginning to end. You can't really pick any of the songs out because if you do, it kind of weakens the album. Like if you say, "Oh, like what's this? The Miracle Cure? There's a Doctor I've Found." Like songs like that, you're like they're like 30 seconds long, but they add to the story. So Tommy from 1969.
Also check out Garrett's video on the Who's ranking video.
Yeah.
I may or may not have done a controversial pick on that video.
I really hope you don't hold that opinion anymore.
It's like the Who. It's just like the Beatles for me. Like my album ratings, besides the Who sellout, my album rankings always change depending on my mood. So
well, mine changed as well. I think Quadrophenia is number 4 now.
Yeah, my biggest problem though with Tommy is for me, like all the albums up until Who Are You, I'd say are all perfect besides Tommy because it has Fiddle About and it has Underture, and I don't like either of those tracks. Those are like the only 2 duds in their 60s/70s period, and that's like the only thing. That's like a thing that always made me always have it lower on the list in terms of like all their essential albums that I rank.
Yeah, it's a great rock opera. I love it.
I have the album.
And I have the album.
Yeah.
Bryer, we got your 5th pick.
5th pick. All right. Okay, we haven't mentioned this band yet, and we probably should at this point. But we're gonna go with Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Yeah, that's who I was going to choose before Nick started talking about Tommy. Not that album though.
Oh yeah.
What album's this?
This is Willie and the Poor Boys.
Yes, I love that album.
Yeah, this is probably my second favorite. It's not my favorite because my favorite came out in 1970.
Yeah.
Couldn't use it, but this is my second favorite. But yeah, this is a classic album by them. I mean, I'm gonna go by quickly, but it starts with Down on the Corner. Great way to open it up.
Great.
And perfectly sums up the cover, because it sounds like a jug band, which is what the whole Willie and the Poor Boys is trying to convey. But that's a great opening track. It Came Out of the Sky is another good song. They do there is a lot of covers, but they've always been fantastic at doing covers. Like you have Cotton Fields, which is a great blues number. Poor Boy Shuffle is probably my least favorite song, but it kind of fits the theme. Feeling Blue is a great another blues song, but of course it has the big hit on here, which is Fortunate Son, which is like another classic you hear in a lot of Vietnam movies and stuff like that, because it pretty much sums up the whole feelings during that time, the draft and all that. So historically it's very significant. Don't Look Now, another fantastic song, another fantastic cover with the Midnight Special. I love their version of it. I mean, John Fogerty, just a great rock singer, just how he hollers, it's just absolutely spectacular. Side of the Road, pretty good. And then closed out with Effigy. Another one of their great closing rock numbers. So yeah, that's my next pick.
I was looking. We've covered like 5 albums from 1969. I just kind of noticed. I feel like we got a lot of 1969 albums.
Yeah, that's my favorite year of the 60s.
It's a good year. Well, probably because it was like the 70s before they were.
I was like, we're just finishing up the 60s. We're just barely getting in. We're barely getting into the 60s and almost 70s here. And we're putting out some great albums.
The moon landing happened in 1969. You're going to say that was a big thing in the 70s? No, it was a big thing in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I forgot to go over some chats here. He says, I was never a big Kinks fan, but I really like the song Lola. Great song.
I hate Lola, but
you hate Lola?
it's not because of the heavy airplay. I just never liked the song.
Yeah.
The airplay just didn't help it.
He never got into Led Zeppelin, which is too bad. That's a big one. Geez, okay. Here, somebody from our channel already commented. Midnight Rambler is better live. Okay,
yeah, I can see it.
So I like the Stones Between the Buttons more, maybe more than Let It Bleed. I don't know. I'm guessing that's what we're talking about. Which we covered both albums, so. I like Dylan's albums, Blonde on Blonde, more. Another fantastic album.
Everybody must get stoned.
Everybody must get stoned.
And then he says yes. Okay. Thank you, Keith, for your contribution. About the only person that's watching us, so thank you. Hopefully more people will be watching afterwards, because I think this is a really cool live stream, in my opinion. Of course, I'm on it, so I'm biased, but anyways. All right, so now we got my 5th pick. And I got to cover my favorite duo of all time. I had to cover Simon and Garfunkel. It's a must. And there's a couple I can pick from. It's kind of hard. But my favorite is Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme. So I'm going to put that on the list. Though there's a couple that might go on as well here. And what can you say? Like, they're the greatest duo of the 60s. And of course, they end up in the 70s. We'll have an album there that I'll cover in the 70s. But the 4 albums they got, and me and Nick are going through the albums actually on his channel. We've covered 1 so far. The debuted Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. And we'll be covering Sounds of Silence here as well. What do you say? It's just a near perfect album for me. Of great harmonies, of course. Their voices sound so good. Paul Simon, I was just thinking today, because I've been listening to Sounds of Silence today. And like Paul Simon, I'm going to say is the greatest acoustic guitar player of all time. I think he's a master at the acoustic guitar, the way he picks and everything. And also little guitar solos here and there. Absolutely amazing. But of course, you got Scarborough Fair, one of the great harmony songs of all time. I love the harmonies on that. It's just masterful. Homeward Bound, amazing song. Love the songwriting of Wanting to Go Home. I love all that. You also have the now I'm forgetting the name of it, but I call it Feeling Groovy is what I wrote down, but it's the something street.
59th Street Bridge.
59th. Yeah, 59th Street. Feeling Groovy. One of the greatest just laid back fun songs to sing to anyways. But whole album's magnificent. One of my favorite out of Simon and Garfunkel. So I'm putting that in my 5th pick here.
Yeah.
Great picks by both, by all three.
Yeah.
Fine. After a couple more picks, we'll bring this band back. Small Faces with their 1967 album, Small Faces. Or if you lived in the U.S., there are but Small Faces, but I'm picking the UK version because to me that's the better of the. Well, not way better, but to me the better of the two. And Tell Me, Have You Ever Seen Me is an amazing track. Great vocal by Steve Marriott. Something I Want to Tell You is great. Lead vocal by Ronnie Lane. Feeling Lonely, really great ballad. Happy Boys Happy is a great instrumental. Things Are Gonna Get Better is great. My Way of Giving is amazing. Green Circles is brilliant. If anyone's familiar with Donovan's music, Hurdy Gurdy, this was the inspiration. Green Circles was the inspiration for that song. So if you're a Donovan guy and you're like, oh man, Hurdy Gurdy, man, it's great. This was the inspiration. Become Like You is brilliant. I love it so much. Get Yourself Together is great. All Our Yesterdays is amazing. Talk to You is very rockin'. This was Zeppelin before Zeppelin was even a thing. Marriott just has such a rockin' voice on this song. I love it so much. Show Me the Way is a great ballad by Ronnie Lane. Up the Wood Hills to Bedfordshire was a McLagan pin track, and he sung on it. And Eddie Streaming's a fun little way to end off the album, which was sung by Ronnie Lane. And this is the first Small Faces record to have all originals. So
okay.
I nicknamed this there for certain because I would say this is their Hard Day's Night, but for certain because in Small Faces 1967 is more of like a more like not experimental like psychedelic, but more of a like, hey, we're our music's growing, and this is like a great sign of what's to come. And of course, the next album that would come after this was Odd Gets Nuck on Flake, and I already gave my opinion on that album. So my number 6 choice is Small Faces, 1967, or Small Faces in Media, because the first album was on Decca, and they had to leave because their label was like, nope, we don't want you doing albums. Stick to your singles. And they're like, no, we want to make albums. we want to be influential. And Decca was like, okay. And they're like, yep, we're leaving.
Yeah. So two albums called Small Faces. This is the second one.
Yes. First one was the one that we reviewed. Which is more of like the kind of a basic 1960s album, like have like the big hits on it, then have like not filler tracks, but songs that weren't as strong on it. And Decca was like, because the Small Faces wanted to grow as a band, and Decca was like, no, we'd rather you be a singles band and do what we want you to do, and do like you did in the first album. We're like, we don't want to do that though, and they ended up leaving Decca, and then they would end up joining Immediate, and that's when they made their 2 best albums. So it was for the best.
All right. So we move to Garrett for your 6th pick.
I got one more album by this band. I think between the 4 of us, we're going to have all of this band's 1960s albums on here, other than maybe one. But I've got My Generation by The Who.
All right.
It's not my favorite Who album, but it's a very strong debut album by them. This is when they were doing the more maximum R&B thing. But it's still a great way to introduce the band, especially with the songs My Generation and The Kids Are All Right. There's also some great James Brown covers on there of I Don't Mind and Please, Please, Please. You got the crazy instrumental song The Ox. That's great. I love La 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 Lies. It's a great pop number by them. Out in the Streets. Maybe not the best way to introduce the band, but I still like the song. Much Too Much, The Good's Gone. Yeah, and A Legal Matter, which is kind of a stupid Pete Townsend-led song. Still good, though. And then you got It's Not True, which is Roger Daltrey kind of like saying all these rumors about him aren't true. Really ridiculous lyrics, but I still like that song. And then depending on if you live in the US or the UK, you get either Instant Party or I'm a Man. I like Instant Party a lot better because it's John Entwistle's first time to play the French horn on a Who recording. I don't like I'm a Man at all. It's sorry to anyone who has the UK album, but yeah, Nick just held it up. But it's a very strong debut. The Who would go on to do better. When I ranked this album, I ranked it behind their second album, but after listening to both of them again, My Generation is definitely better than their second album.
That's fair. I love My Generation. If anyone watched the video, I made it no secret. I'm more of a fan of the early stuff, like pre-Tommy stuff, like My Generation, Quick One, Who Sell Out, Magic Bus. Those are still my 4 favorite Who albums as of now, but the times can be a-changing.
The times they are a-changing.
And to me, I agree. Instant Party is a much better Who song than, of course, I'm a Man. But the having the Ox not close out the My Generation album to me is a serious crime. And
I feel between the two versions and all the singles that they released at that time, there's a great album in there somewhere. It's just we're never going to get to hear that version.
Me and Garrett made a video on that. If you ever want to check
we
that
did.
out.
We need to pick that series up again because the Who's second album needs some help.
Yeah, it has 9 tracks, and that could have been a 12-track album.
Yeah.
All right, now go to Bryer for your 6th pick, I believe.
All right. Next up, I didn't know which album I should go for this band because it was either the debut or their second album, and if there's time, I can showcase the first album, but I'm going to go with my favorite of 2, and that's their second album. So the band in question is The Band.
The Band.
Yeah, so the band, so they are so this is just their self-titled album, which is their second album. Some people call it the Brown album because obviously it's brown. But yeah, this is their second studio album. And it's my favorite of them so far. I haven't heard everything, but from what I've heard, this is still my favorite. There's the CD copy, by the way. It's a good old Americana roots rock, which is ironic that they're labeled Americana because only one of the members was actually from America. The rest are Canadian.
Okay.
Yeah, and all the songs were written by a Canadian as well. So, regardless, still, this is a terrific album. Just a great. All the musicians on here just all blend well together. And of course, little fun fact for those who don't know, the band got their start because a lot of the members were part of Bob Dylan's band when he first went electric. So until they finally branched out and made their own music. But yeah, it starts out with Across the Great Divide, which is a great opening track. Just sets the whole tone of the album perfectly. They have Rag Mama Rag. Good, kind of get you moving on that one. Then you have probably one of their most well-known songs, which is The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, which is, if you're a Civil War fan, then that's especially if you're a historian of that time, then that fills you in because that's a good one. When You Awake's pretty good. Up on Cripple Creek is another one of their well-known songs. Has a great groove to it, and of course, Levon Helm, the drummer, just has a great drum beat to it, and also does a great vocal on it. Whispering Pines is a great slow ballad. It's a beautiful song. Jemima Surrender is great. Rockin' Chair is pretty good. Look Out Cleveland, Jawbone. And another one of my favorite songs on this album is Unfaithful Servant, which is, again, another ballad song, but it's just the emotion on that. You can just hear it throughout. And it closes out with King Harvest has surely come. So yeah, this is a terrific album. If there's time, I might show the first album because that's also a very good album, but this is my favorite one, so that's my next pick.
Is there an album called something like The Pink Chair or something?
Yeah, you're thinking of their first album.
That's the first album. Okay, I feel like I've heard that a lot in the band.
I think he's confusing Music from Big Pink and Songs from the Big Chair by Tears for Fears.
Yes, they all sound.
They're kind of brother sister, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, I don't know the band that well. I just know.
Me neither. I just heard the album title before.
I've heard the album titles, and I've heard there's one song they play all the time. And I'm
Probably think of The Wait.
The Way, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Go check them out because they're really good.
Yeah, I know people like them a lot, but I've never gotten into them personally. Keith says Bookends was better, which I had a hard time picking between Bookends, Parsley Sage. They're both really good albums. You can go with each one. Nick agrees with him, I'm guessing. So I'm the odd one out here. And then we got Mike. Hey, how you doing, Mike?
Hello.
Good to see you, even though you're not a music guy. All right. Next, I'm gonna have to pick. I'm not going exactly with my favorite albums, but I'm going with albums I love. But I'm trying to hit different artists on mine, and this is one I feel like I have to mention, and that's Jimi Hendrix with his debut album, "Are You Experienced?" which is my favorite. It came out in 1967. He only made 3 albums. This is my favorite album of his. And again, it's like a greatest hits of Jimi Hendrix. And Jimi Hendrix, to me, is the greatest guitar player of all time. I mean, his guitar playing, to this day, I've never heard anybody like him. And this was, 60 years ago, or not 60, but 50 some years ago, probably. I don't know. This album came out, and it's like, I never heard anybody play like this guy, which is just absolutely crazy. He just totally changed the game to me on guitar playing, as far as using feedback, distortion. It's just to me, this is like, when I think of psychedelic music, this is the album I think about. To me, it's probably, other than the Beatles, it's like the greatest psychedelic album I think put out there. But you got Purple Haze, one of my favorite rock songs of all time, with one of the greatest rock riffs to begin that song. It's absolutely amazing. Love that song. But like I said, it's got a lot of great songs on here. Foxy Lady, great, love it. Hey Joe is a little slower, fantastic. The Wind Cries Mary, again, almost a little slower style, but I love the guitar on there as well. I mean, guitar riffs, guitar solos, Jimi Hendrix did it the best, I think. So you have to listen to this album. Are You Experienced?
How many albums are we in?
We all did 6 albums, so 6 times 4, I guess, which is
24.
24.
Halfway there.
Yep.
Whoa,
Halfway there. So this will be 25. And I was so conflicted of whether to pick this album by the Byrds or this album by the Byrds, which me and Bryer will be reviewing sometime today. And I chose Younger Than Yesterday because, to me, this is more of a band effort than the following one, because Crosby's not much in it as this album. And also Gene Clark ends up being on this album for a tiny bit on Going Back and a different track. But I bet Bryer probably knew that going into the, because he usually likes to research more of the album than I usually do. And starts off with an amazing track. So you want to be a rock and roll star, which is supposed to be about the Monkees. And pretty cool fact. I heard it first from Bryer, but every video I look up, I usually get that info as well. But pretty cool song. And that leads to one of Chris Hillman's best songs, which is Have You Ever Seen Her Face, which is this incredible track, really great pop record track. And the next track, Bryer's not into it, which I could see why, and that's CTA 102, which is it's about going to outer space and seeing aliens and all that. And towards the end, it's like alien noises at the end, which here's when I say a little bit of controversial things. Like, if this was a Beatles track, it would be a lot more loved. That's just what I think. And that goes into a great Crosby co-written track, Renaissance Fair, which once you hear that chorus, it'll get stuck in your head for a little bit. I know it got stuck in my head when I first heard it. Time Between's a really great track. Everybody's Been Burned Before, or just Everybody's Been Burned, is a Crosby lead sung track, which is a great song. Thoughts and Words, which opens up side 2, is really great. Mind Gardens, which is, to me, Crosby's masterpiece. A lot of people call it the worst song on the album, which to me, I find blasphemous, but it is what it is. People have their opinions. Again, if this was if this was a Beatles track, everyone would be raving over it because everything the Beatles does is the best thing ever. And
Oh yeah.
there's the psychedelia. All the Beatles could do is psychedelia, and I strongly disagree. My Gardens to me is better than anything that the Beatles done psychedelia wise. I even think it's better. Like, I think it's better than Tomorrow Never Knows. But I know I'm gonna get some haters out there yelling at me like how could you say that? Nail this guy to a cross. I hate him now, but common Nick L, I guess, if it was a TikTok comment section. My Back Pages, which is to me arguably the best Bob Dylan cover that they did. I love it a lot.
Yeah.
And The Girl with No Name's pretty good. And Why? Great closer. And like I said, it was a mix between that album and this album. Both are great though. And going back to preferences, I prefer the mono version of Younger Than Yesterday.
All right, so go to Garrett with your 7th pick.
It's time for some more Credence. Going back to 1969, Green River.
Yeah.
My second favorite Credence album. It's
Yep.
got Bad Moon Rising is the big hit on this one, but all the songs are great. Green River is really great. Wrote a Song for Everyone, amazing. Lodi is like some of the best Credence on here. It's also got their cover of The Nighttime Is the Right Time, which is the Ray Charles cover. It's got Good Golly Miss Molly. So some of their better cover songs are on this album. It's just a full blast Credence album. I'm going to take one more look at the track listing just to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, I think Good Golly
So I know there's a
Bayou Country though.
No, it's on. Oh wait, no, that's on Bayou Country. Okay, I pulled up the wrong one. What's on this one? Oh, Commotion and Tombstone Shadow. Yeah, those are great songs. Bad Moon Rising. Yeah, this does have Their Nighttime Is the Right Time, but it's got Cross Tie Walker. That's a great song. Really great Creedence album.
Yeah, it's a great album.
Green River.
1969 again. All right, you go to Bryer for your 7th pick.
All right, let's go back to some weird stuff. Okay, so now let's go to the Velvet Underground. And
Okay,
Ego.
someone had to mention this album.
Yeah, someone had to mention it. I'm that person. But
I have not listened to that.
Better
album.
you than me, because I hate the album. But
yeah, it's a weird album. That's the reputation it has. But the legend has it that it sold poorly when this first came out. I think legend has it only sold like 30,000 copies. And the legend is that every single person who bought this album started a band. So that's the legend, at least. I don't know if it's true, but I don't know.
And you can peel the banana off the front.
Yeah, sadly you can't do it. You can't do it on the CD, but if you can peel the banana. It shows on if you take it out, but this is what you would get.
okay,
A little pink banana. Yeah, but this is where Lou Reed. Yeah.
Is it Andy Hall or something like that?
Yeah, Andy Warhol. He was the manager, and he produced this album.
Oh, really?
And he designed the cover as well.
He designed it. I know that.
Same guy who did Sticky Fingers.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, this is where Lou Reed got his start. This is where he gained prominence. I mean, Lou Reed is known for pretty much wrote all the lyrics for this, and he's known for writing in very dark subjects. Like, by this point, the hippie movement was in full swing, and so everyone was like peace and love and all that. But Lou Reed was kind of like he wasn't in on it at all. I mean, famously or infamously, he's not a fan. He was not a fan of the Beatles at all. So yeah, so he was one of those people. So he joined this band. I'm pretty sure it tells you the whole members. Of course, you have John Cale, who was on here as well. Sterling Morrison, Maureen Tucker, who is the drummer. And then the full album title of this is called The Velvet Underground and Nico, because Andy Warhol kind of had this other clients, shall we say, and he was like, hey, how about you bring her into the band? And they were like, okay. And so yeah, so she's included on here. So going through the track, starts with Sunday Morning, which when you first hear it, it has kind of this almost like music box quality to it, but that's just a false facade and what you're really coming in for. Next song is I'm Waiting for the Man, which is basically this guy waiting for his drug dealer, basically. Then you have Femme Fatale, which is the first song where Nico sings vocals on it. And, Nico is kind of, in terms of her vocals, I mean, she's a German, she's from Germany, I think, originally. Okay. So you definitely hear her accent a lot, very prominently. And, she's no Whitney Houston, but she definitely takes a bit to get used to, especially with the accent. But once you finally get used to it, she's actually pretty good. She fits the mood really well. She has a very lower register when it comes to her singing. So I think it works. Then you have the next three songs were probably the most weirdest. You have Venus and Furs, which are Venus and Furs, Run, Run, Run. And then you have All Tomorrow's Party, which are very weird. Like definitely experimenting to the max here, playing with different sounds, different sound effects. So yeah, then you have track 7, which is just called Heroin, which is probably my favorite song on the album. Just talking about
name.
Yes,
probably some heroin going around.
Yeah, they didn't sugarcoat anything when it comes to their songwriting. So yeah, this perfectly sums up what taking heroin's like.
Yeah, exactly.
Because obviously Lou Reed had a problem with heroin, so
that's what I understand.
Yeah. Then there she goes again. I'll be your mirror, which is probably my favorite song Nico sings on this album. I think that's a good song. The Black Angels Death Song, that's a good one. And then it closes out with European songs. So again, it's weird. Definitely not commercial sounding very much at all. But if you're into that, that's why I say this is essential, because it's weird, but it feels like it's the type of weird you have to experience at least one time. So yeah, that's going to be my next pick.
I don't understand that album at all.
Yeah.
People love that album.
Yeah.
It's high on every list.
Mm-hmm.
So it had to be on this list. I didn't want to be the one to have to mention it because
yeah.
So it's on my list, but I'm like, I hope someone else mentions this album because I couldn't do it justice.
Yeah.
So, another album that everyone always says is amazing in some of the 60s that I think is absolute garbage.
What?
Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart.
I don't get that either.
Who likes that? It's audio garbage and it sounds terrible.
Yeah, I'm with
I've
you.
heard that album before.
Oh, just go listen to Frownland by Captain Beefheart. It's the first song on the album. You'll get exactly what the album's going to sound like. It's something else.
Same with Tiny Tim, though. Some people mention Tiny Tim. Not on Essential Albums list, but...
Nick, I'm going to send you a link to that album.
Okay.
You tell me what you think of it.
But people tell me that Velvet Underground Nico is like very influential to music. I don't know how, but that's what I'm told. So
yeah, they were very influential for indie bands or garage bands. They were very influential in that regard.
They're important for that reason, even though I don't like their music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is essential, so it belongs. I agree. Mm-hmm. Anyways, well, we haven't talked enough about the Beatles, so I'm going to right that wrong right now, and I'm going to put Rubber Soul as my next pick on this. It's my second favorite Beatles album, and I haven't mentioned it yet because I just assumed somebody else would probably get to it at some point, but it's gone this far. I have to put it in here. It's an album right before Revolver. As you can tell, this is my favorite era of Beatles music, is this kind of folk rock psychedelic era that we're getting into. And again, it feels a little bit different than the other albums before. Like I said, definitely being influential by Bob Dylan, his style. They were really big fans of Bob Dylan. And I think the writing style was getting even better. And they were trying to expand more on what they're writing about. Everything up to this point really was just love songs, and catchy love songs is kind of what their bread and butter was. And they were really good at it. But now they're doing different. They're spending more time in the studio. Really, like I think Nick mentioned, this is when it's like, okay, we're going to make albums. It's not going to just be a bunch of random songs. It's going to be a complete album, perfect album. And it's the album that, like I said, I believe Brian Wilson listened to, was like, oh my gosh, I need to make an album like this one. So I mean, it's just one of those albums that just influenced everybody at that point. And it's just amazing. I think everything, again, I think the guitars are getting a little more heavier in this one. The bass definitely is. They call it the fuzzy bass sound.
Yeah.
It's kind of coming in on this album. I mean, with the very first song, Baby You Can Drive My Car, to me, that's definitely the heaviest song that they've written about up to that point. And it'll get even heavier with Revolver. But I mean, great stuff there. One of the great songs I've written in my life. John wrote a great song about, looking at the past. Absolutely amazing. Norwegian Wood, Nowhere Man. I mean, this is absolutely amazing song, amazing album. Great musicianship, but also still got that great Beatles harmonies in there. And yeah, it's an absolute masterpiece. Rubber Soul from 1965.
You didn't say Beatles for Sale? That's their best album.
I haven't mentioned that one.
Okay, so we're gonna go to a band that I mentioned once early in the video, and I'm gonna mention now again. That is the Kinks. Something Else by the Kinks. Their 1967 masterpiece.
Something Else by the Kinks. Is that the name of it?
Yeah, Something Else by the Kinks.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of weird. Like, oh, I'm gonna bring Something Else by the Kinks.
What is it? Something else. What is it? Something else.
Opens up great with David Watts. I love that track. Death of a Clown, which has an amazing lead vocal by Dave Davies, Ray Davies' brother. Two Sisters, which is basically Ray Davies basically writing a song about how they used to fight and all that. And it's basically kind of like that. He doesn't mention anything about Dave Davies, but this song's kind of about them. I really like it. No Return's a pretty good song. Harry Rag's a fun little song. Tin Soldier Man's great. Situation Vacant is amazing, brilliant. Next side opens up with Love Me Till the Sun Shines, which is amazing. It's a very rocking song. It was the B-side to Death of a Clown, which was interesting enough. What was released as just Dave Davies. Those two songs, and it was interesting and great song. Lazy Old Sun, which is a nice little psychedelic song. And like I said before with Wicked Annabella, like they do very little psychedelic songs, but when they do it brilliantly. Afternoon Tea, which is great. Funny Face, which is cool. End of the Season, I love. And of course, their big song on the album, Waterloo Sunset, which is a masterpiece.
Oh, such a great song.
Yeah, it's great. And if you want to check out great songs on a Kinks album, this is a great album to go to. I will say it's interesting that this is 1967. This is the hippies, love, all of that, drugs and all that, and the Kinks are writing Afternoon Tea, Love Me Till the Sun Shines. But I think that's a cool contrast because Ray Davies didn't care about appealing to the masses. He was just like, I'm just gonna make great music, and great music they made. So that is my 8th album.
Where is that in the Kinks discography?
It is their 5th album.
Okay.
The first 3 albums are more like the first 3 albums is like more of like the punk rock, not punk, but like early rock and roll, and it just gets better after each one. And then,
well, I'm guessing You Really Got Me is one of the early ones.
Yeah, that was
their first one.
Okay.
And then they released this album, Face to Face, and then they released that album. Then
heard of that, Face to Face, yeah.
The magnum opus, Village Green Preservation Society. Then they made Arthur, and then they made Lola versus Power Man, which is a album.
Yeah.
I would have mentioned that already, but it's not a 60s record. I wish it was, because it's great.
All right, next we go to Garrett for your.
We need more Beatles. I was positive people were going to do more Beatles, but I'm going to do the Beatles album that nobody else is going to pick. That should be on the list because it's still essential. But wait, no, I can't because that came out in 1970. I was going to choose Let It Be, but that's a 70 album.
1970. Yep.
So instead, I'm going to go with A Hard Day's Night from 1964.
All right.
The first Beatles album to have all original songs on it.
Yeah.
And the only Beatles album to have only songs written by Lennon and McCartney.
Yeah.
This album is Beatlemania, and it is pop perfection at its finest. It's got some great songs like A Hard Day's Night, and I Should Have Known Better, and If I Fell, Can't Buy Me Love. And the B-side is great too, with You Can't Do That, I'll Cry Instead, Things We Said Today, and I'll Be Back. So, fantastic album.
Yeah, that's like the essential album of the early Beatles, I would say.
Oh yeah, it's the early Beatles album.
Yeah, like you said, Beatlemania, basically. Yeah. All right, Garrett, we go to your 8th pick, I believe.
I think it's my turn now.
I mean, Garrett. Sorry, did I say Garrett?
Yeah.
Bryer. Garrett just Bryer. Sorry.
I know the hack guys are very confusing.
Yeah, I'm I'm trying to write everything down as I'm going. So
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good. All right. I think we should go back to some Bob Dylan. So might as well go with the other big album of his. We gotta go with the Blonde on Blonde.
Yeah. Blonde on Blonde.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's my favorite of his 60s output. Yeah, there's less. There's like 14 songs, so I'm not going to go through every one. But of course, there's a lot of standout songs like here. Of course, you have, it starts out with Rainy Day Women, 12 and 35, which I think that's I like that song. I think that's a pretty good opening track. But then you have other big standout songs like Visions of Johanna.
Yeah.
One of Us Must Know is a great one. I Want You is really good. And of course, there's a lot of long songs, but I enjoy a lot of long songs like Stuck Inside of Mobile with the Memphis Blues Again. Long title, but still a great song. Just Like a Woman. I think that's a fantastic song. Just really beautiful song. Temporary Like Achilles is great. Absolutely Sweet Marie. Obviously 5 Believers. And then it closes out with the 11-minute song Sad Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, which even though it's 11 minutes, it's still like you can go on for longer and I still won't care. It's just this, again, the arrangement on here is just beautiful. And I think Jason already brought it up, like Bob Dylan, he's not known as a great singer, but you just kind of feel like earnest in his voice, and that's really the big thing. And you believe what he's singing about. It just fits the song great. But yeah, of course, it's had to be mentioned. So Blonde on Blonde for me.
I prefer the Hollies version of Just Like a Woman. To me, that's my favorite version of the song. There are a couple songs where I prefer the Bob Dylan version, but the majority of songs on the Hollies Sing Dylan album, which I'm not going to be including on the list, but definitely check it out after if you are going to be checking out all 50 of these albums you haven't, check out Hollies Sing Dylan at least sometime in your life.
Yeah, I actually love that last song. It goes on a long time, but it's amazing. Great pick there. Keith says favorite Beatles album is Rubber Soul. That's my second favorite Beatles album, so I'm right with you. Still, absolute main song. We're starting to get more up the list, so I feel like I got to get these Beatles albums in here. I do not want to leave this list without these Beatles albums on here, and so I have to put Abbey Road on here, which is most everybody's like favorite Beatles album. So you can't not have this not on the list. Coming out in 1969, basically their last album they recorded, but not the last album they put out. Because 1970 will get Let It Be. Obviously, they're going through a lot of turmoil at this point. Let It Be was kind of somewhat of a disaster. The album's great, but the whole process was, you can see it on the Get Back documentary on Disney Plus by Peter Jackson. But they come back with this great closer. Kind of, I don't know what you guys think. Do you guys think this is a closer for the Beatles?
I think so.
Let It Be is.
Heck yeah.
They both are.
Yeah.
Let It Be's their coda, I would say.
Yeah, the big closer with Abbey Road, and then Let It Be is like one last hurrah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, what a great closer to it. I mean, you got, to me, like one of the great rock songs of all time, Come Together, opening it up. Absolutely love that song. One of the great bass lines of all time, in my opinion. And then you got two of George's best songs of all time, two absolutely amazingly beautiful songs. Something, great love song, amazing guitar. I love the guitar on that song. And then Here Comes the Sun is like the song that just makes you happy to listen to. It's a song of just, almost encouragement, or it's a song that brings you up when you're down. I think because the sun is awesome when it comes up, and you got to feel that that sunlight on you, and it captures that so perfectly. Beautiful acoustic guitar playing on that as well. Plus, you have to mention the last part of the album, the medley, is everybody's kind of favorite on there. A lot of cool stuff there, and you end with the end, which is a great. Except you have Our Majesty like after that, but to me, I consider the end kind of the great last Beatles song to finish it all out, and that great piano with the love you make is equal to or love you take is equal to love you make, or something like that. Beautiful line to end the Beatles. Greatest band of all time.
Great album. I'm gonna finish off the Who albums of the '60s. This is the very last Who album of the '60s.
What one?
Garrett covered My Generation, Tommy. I covered the Who Sellout and Magic Bus. I guess I'll cover the fifth of the five. A quick one. They were going through some turmoil with Shell Tommy, and then they would end up firing him, and then they got a new producer, and they were like, "Hey, we want you to write we want each and every one of you to write at least 2 songs on the album." Roger Daltrey ends up writing only 1 song, but Keith Moon writes 2 songs on the album, and I love them to death.
Cobwebs and Strange is weird though.
I love weird songs. So, and of course, like I always say it, if it was the Beatles, it would be a lot more popular. But Cobwebs and Strange has amazing drumming on it. I wouldn't say it's better than Moby Dick or Toad by Cream, but it's still great though. I Need You is an amazing track. My favorite of the 3 I Need Yous I ever heard. There's the Beatles I Need You, there's the Kinks I Need You, and then there's the Who I Need You. And the Who is my favorite version, and only the Beatles coming in second place on that one. Whiskey Man is an amazing track. Great End Whistle track. Same with Boris the Spider.
Boris the Spider.
Yeah, that's a good one.
First black metal vocals.
Yeah.
See My Ways, the Roger Daltrey track. Really good. The rest of it was written by Pete Townsend. Run, Run, Run is great. Don't Look Away is a really great pop song. So Sad About Us is amazing. And of course you can't not talk about this album without talking about the 9-minute opus, or however long it is, A Quick One While He's Away. That song is brilliant. It's a story about a woman who cheats on a guy with the Ivor, the engine driver, and you have a vocal from Pete Townsend a little bit with the spoken bit with the little girl. Don't you stop your crying. I'm gonna make you feel all right. And then of course Roger Daltrey singing in it, and Entwistle sings in it, and of course that beginning section. My mom loves it the best with the "Her man's been gone." That whole section, and then this whole song just fits together so well, and it ends perfectly. And last song I'm gonna mention is the cover on it, "Heat Wave," which I love it a lot. But here in the U.S., we had a version called "Happy Jack," which replaces that song.
Right.
And if you want an album that's filled with just Who's written tracks, then get that.
Or you can get the copy Jason has that has Heatwave and Happy Jack on it.
Yes. I have that version too, where it has a quick one in the Who Sell Out. And,
really? Yeah.
I love it. I got it for like very cheap, but yeah. If you ever find that at a record store, like the Who Sell Out and this album, what I consider to be, well, if you're considering real Who albums, this is my second favorite Who album. For including Magic Bus is my third favorite Who album. But if you want to have 2 great Who albums in one, get that set that Jason has.
You can also get the My Generation and Magic Bus 2 for 1.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was the only version I had, the US version at the time, before Garrett was very kindly gave me bought me a copy of My Generation, which the U.S. version that is, and very grateful for that. And this is the mono version of a quick one, which says it right here. I definitely recommend the mono version.
I think it was only available in mono in the UK. Like, there's a stereo Happy Jack, but 3 of the songs are in fake stereo.
Yeah, but But besides the Who sellout, I'd say get the mono version of the first.
My biggest complaint with that album is the production is crap on that album. The cymbals with Keith Moon's cymbals are way too loud. So I was listening to that the other day because I said, like, my friend and I are going through the Who's discography. When we played my Happy Jack record, we had to turn the volume way down because Keith Moon's cymbals were louder than anything else on the thing, and it just hurt our ears so badly.
That's a shame. Because
maybe I need to get a graphic equalizer so I can turn the treble down and it'll make the album more balanced. But I feel like Keith Moon is just such a monster drummer, and it was he was the early Kit Lambert. Kit Lambert's first time working with the Who. He probably didn't know how to handle Keith's drumming.
Yeah, that explains it.
All right, so now we go to Garrett for your 9th pick.
Number 9.
Yep.
Number
9.
Going back to 1969, we're gonna go with the Chicago Transit Authority.
Oh,
First
good.
album by Chicago. Love that album. I'm a big fan of Chicago. It's Chicago's only 1960s album, and it's really crazy because their first album was a double album. I don't know how you would ever release a first album as a double album unless it was in the 1960s, but it's a double album. Most of the songs on here are really good. I'm not a big fan of Freeform Guitar because Terry Kath is a much better guitar player than that. He was messing around with some feedback in the studio, and they recorded him without him even knowing it. It wasn't even supposed to be a song. He was just playing around. He was upset they put it on the album because his guitar playing is very good. Jimi Hendrix really admired him. If you want some good Terry Kath guitar playing, I would definitely look to any other song but Freeform Guitar because every other song he plays on is amazing. Introduction is a great introduction to the band. Does anybody really know what time it is? Has this great piano solo from Robert Lamb. Great. Oh, the horns are really what make this band. The horn section is amazing in this band. You got Questions 67 and 68, which is the vocal debut of Peter Cetera. Great bass player, great singer. Listen, South California Purples. And they got their cover of Steve Winwood's I'm a Man, which is amazing. Just fantastic instruments playing, like fantastic instrumentalists on this album. Poem 58, great shredding from Terry Kath. Just the whole album is just very good. Features a prominent brass section, great guitar playing from Kath, great bass playing from Cetera, great piano playing from Robert Lamb, and the best thing is that there are 3 different lead vocalists, so you kind of get different sounds to each song. Robert Lamb is the one who kind of sings the most. He's the piano player, but we also get some songs from Terry Kath, the guitar player, and Peter Cetera, the bass player. So, great album.
Amazing musicianship, amazing singing. Yeah, it's great.
Freeform Guitar.
All right, you go to Bryer for your 9th.
I saw Freeform Guitar, and I was expecting some kind of proto-eruption, or kind of like what Jimmy Page did in the middle of Heartbreaker, but nope, it was just Terry Kath messing around with feedback.
Yeah. All right. So for my next one, I'm kind of gonna piggyback off of Garrett because he talked more of like a jazz rock sort of thing. I'm just gonna strip it back. Let's go to just some regular jazz, because jazz was still a pretty big thing in the '60s. I'm not gonna say I'm an expert on '60s jazz, but there's definitely are some big names when it comes to the jazz scene in that time, and I'm gonna showcase just one of them. So I'm gonna go with John Coltrane. This is A Love Supreme.
Yeah,
probably one of the when people usually recommend jazz, this is usually one of the albums people recommend. And John Coltrane is a big name, especially because he's known for his saxophone playing. And it had pretty much all the characteristics we associate jazz with, on a technicality, there's only 4 songs, and they can go on for pretty long jams. But that's really the point of jazz. It's about kind of just like almost improvising, but still kind of be tight with one another. But of course, the saxophone playing stands out. But you also have piano, you have bass, and you have drums. And again, the connections with those 4 players is really well done. Just well done. I'll kind of just read what the CD says. It pretty much sums it up. John Coltrane saw the album-length suite "A Love Supreme" as his gift to God. The world has come to see it as a classic, not only Coltrane's best-known work, but one of his most important and influential jazz records ever made. So that pretty much sums it up. So
again, I need to listen to that. I love Giant Steps, so I not the song. I haven't listened to the album, but I need to get into jazz more. I'll take a listen to that album because that sounds really interesting. Sounds right up my alley because it's only like 4 songs.
Yeah, 4 songs. And yeah, it's really good. I think it deserves the reputation it gets. But I don't know. I haven't heard everything from John Coltrane, so we'll see if that holds up. But yeah, I want to at least we gotta have at least one pure jazz album, especially for the jazz fans out there who might be watching this later. But
they might be mad, if you don't put it down.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So yeah,
hopefully.
It's between Coltrane and Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the trumpet player is really popular.
Yeah, John. I do have some Miles Davis, but
Miles Davis.
Yeah, Miles Davis. I do have a couple, but for the 60s, I like his more jazz fusion stuff than his pure stuff.
Or Count Basie or Dave Brubeck.
Yeah.
I think isn't it Bitches Brew or something like that? And that a big one?
Miles Davis.
Watch your mouth, Jason.
I know. I did
not soap in your mouth. I've never heard Jason cuss before.
It's the name of the album. That's all.
I know. If it's the name of the album, it don't count.
Yeah, that was 1970, I think. That album.
Yeah. Love Supreme, is that the name of it?
Yeah, Love Supreme.
Yeah. I've heard of that. I've heard the name.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I understand. Yeah, that's a big one for jazz. So please the jazz fans with that one.
Yeah.
All right. Right. My 9th pick, and I'm having a hard time kind of deciding where to go on this. Because I want to go with something I haven't gone with yet. I'm gonna go pick Buffalo Springfield debut album. Buffalo Spring came out in 1966, and one of my favorite albums. It's definitely one of the pioneers of folk rock music in that era with the Byrds, and it's a great debut album. It has one of the great 60s songs. For what it's worth, I mean, I feel like if you watch a movie from the 60s or a movie about the 60s, you're going to hear the song For What's Worth is going to play, because you got the Neil Young great ringing guitar, that ring in the background, and Stephen Stills, absolutely amazing, wrote the song. Some of a protest song, which is, I don't know, something like that. Kind of a protest song of that time, which is very popular in the 60s. Protesting was very popular. And so it really captures that feel. And of course, like I said, you got two members go on to do Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, which is one of my favorite bands. They're absolutely amazing together, Neil Young and Stephen Stills. But it's really, solid. That's really the only hit song. There's a song called Out of My Mind, which I absolutely love, which is like a Neil Young song.
That's my favorite song on the album.
Yeah, I absolutely love this song. It's not one anybody talks about. It wasn't a song that was like a big hit or anything, but it was like when they did this album, they kind of said, Neil Young, we don't really like your voice that much. So we're going to have, I forget the name of the other guy. There's another guitar player in the band, and he sings all of Neil Young stuff, basically.
Is it Dewey or something like that?
Yeah, I can't remember now. I should know it, but Neil Young and Stephen Stills basically wrote all the songs on the album, but they gave a lot of Neil Young songs to the other guitar player because they didn't think, which is to me ridiculous, because I love Neil Young's voice. He's got such a unique voice that nobody sounds like Neil Young. So So when you get to Out of My Mind, you're like, yes, like this is a great song. Like I need more Neil Young, which they give him more songs on the second
I
album.
think he also had the Burned song on the first album.
Burned. Yeah, I just mentioned it, and you know what's crazy is when I first heard it, I was like, is that Mike Nesmith from the Monkees? I actually thought it was Mike Nesmith from the Monkees because the voice sounds so similar to Mike Nesmith. I'm like, is that Mike Nesmith? I'm like, did Mike Nesmith was he involved with the Buffalo Springfield album? That's cool. But then I looked it up and I'm like, oh, it's not him. But it sounds very similar. Like if you have go back to those two songs and tell me that doesn't sound at least a little similar to Mike Nesmith.
Okay, from the Monkees.
Yeah.
No song. Do I have to come right out and say it? Absolutely great love song. Anyways,
what's the song? Something about ground or whatever, flying off the ground or whatever.
Yeah.
I love that track. I wanted to mention Buffalo Springfield, but it was a toss up between that album or Buffalo Springfield again because those are my two favorite albums by them. Well,
good album.
Only had 3 albums, but those first 2 albums are so good, and even the third album is extremely underrated. They
only made 3 albums, before they
had a perfect catalog though. Their 3 albums to me are perfect. I don't think there's not a single bad track on it off of either of those albums. But besides one track that off the first album, well, the 1966 first album, which is just all right. But then it got substituted for the hit song.
Substitute.
But that's my 9th pick. Buffalo Springfield by Buffalo Springfield.
Great pick.
Too bad they didn't have a song called Buffalo Springfield on that album, like Bad Company.
Yeah.
It's the song Bad Company by Bad Company on the album Bad Company.
I mean, Black Sabbath had an album, Black Sabbath, which they had. The first track was Black Sabbath on their album Black Sabbath. So I'm gonna go not a complete opposite turn on that album, but I'm gonna go to Graham Nash's masterpiece, Butterfly. And, this album was Graham Nash at his most experimental. This was Graham Nash at his most control over the Hollies. And,
right.
You can definitely hear it, and it's the most whimsical out of all of them. There are some tracks that it does go a little overboard on, but I will go into that. Dear Eloise is an amazing opener. Away, Away, Away is great. Maker, it's a great track, but it's probably the weakest out of all of them. The sitar is pretty cool on it though. Pegasus, which was Tony Hicks's one and only song on the album, it's really good. He's a great vocalist. I'm surprised he never sung more on the albums. Would You Believe, which I always found it interesting, but they had an album called Would You Believe? And but then like years late, well not years, but like a year after, they had a song called Would You Believe? I always found that interesting.
That's a good one, yeah.
Wish You a Wish, which is Graham Nash, basically like it's basically like Graham Nash's When I'm 64 or Graham Nash's Honey Pie. It's pretty good. Next track though, side 2 opens up with Postcard, and I love that track. I know Garrett right away thinks of the Who's track off of Odds and Sods, which is Postcard as well. We're having a lovely time. But this is a completely different song. I love it, which is another Graham Nash lead vocal. This is I think this is it is the most lead vocals that Graham Nash has on the Hollies album, which I love Graham Nash's vocals, and I made it no secret in the Crosby, Stills, Nash album review that I like the Graham Nash songs the most on the album. So hearing it here, if you're just like me who is a huge Graham Nash fan and loves all of his contributions on Crosby, Stills, and Nash, check this album out. You won't be upset. Charlie and Fred is pretty good. Try It is very experimental. It's their most experimental song. Elevated Observations is pretty cool. Step Inside is pretty fun. And Butterfly. I love this track because it's just Graham Nash and the orchestration. And I love it so much because it closes out the album, and it's just like, to me, it's Graham Nash's sort of last hurrah before he leaves the Hollies and before he goes to Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Yep.
It's like it's almost like he's like, "Yep, Butterfly. It's my last song with the Hollies on an album. So long, guys." And then he's gone with the Hollies, and then of course he ends up him, David Crosby, and Stephen Stills makes this amazing super group, and the rest is history. But yeah, that's my number 10 choice.
All right.
Butterfly.
Butterfly. All right. I figured that would come up along with Evolution. Those are the two I was expecting.
My 10th choice is an album that I've only heard once, but it made that much of an impact on me. And it's one by a group we've not mentioned yet, but I'm going to go with The Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues.
Moody Blues, okay.
I've only heard this album once. I don't know why I haven't listened to it again, but it was a fantastic album. I listened to it when I was kind of into the Electric Light Orchestra because I heard that it had some orchestra with rock music. And it's a concept album just about a normal day. You go through the morning and the afternoon and the lunch hour and the evening and then the night. And the night is the big famous song from this album, Nights in White Satin.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like poetry dispersed throughout the album, kind of little poems about the day. Then there's orchestra music, and then there's just like 1960s style pop in between all that. And it's just a great album that I definitely need to have a listen to again. And the end is absolutely haunting with that gong.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that stuck with me whenever I heard it. That the gong that ends the album, kind of like night breaking. But Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
I was going to say, it sounds like a Bryer for some reason.
Yeah, that was one I was considering.
All right.
So
now we go to Bryer for your 10th pick.
All right, so this next one, I can see people saying it's not that essential, but I love it, so I'm just going to include it anyway. And another thing about this particular band is that to probably the general people, they probably see them more as a singles band. But like I said, I love this whole album. I love every song on here. So I'm going to go with If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears.
California Dreamin'.
Yes. So yeah, this is a great album. This is their first album. And many great songs on here. I mean, it starts out with Monday, which is one of their big hits. I mean, obviously the big thing about them is their vocal arrangements. I mean, John Phillips was the one who kind of coordinated who was singing what and all that stuff, and it all just blends really well. Straight Shooter's great. Got a Feeling. I Call Your Name is another pretty well-known song. You have Mama Cass Elliott on the lead vocals on that one, and yeah, she's fantastic. She's a great singer. Do You Want to Dance? Great. Of course, I mean, it goes without saying, we got to mention California Dreamin', Representin' My State.
From California.
Yes, so gotta mention that one. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. I love the flute solo in that song. It's just so fantastic. And one of the earliest songs I learned to play on bass. It's very good. Spanish Harlem is also really good. Hey Girl, In Crowd. Yeah, top to bottom, it's a great like 60s pop album. And yeah, I recommend people check it out. I'm done.
Okay. Can You Believe Your Eyes and Ears?
Yeah, if you can believe your eyes and ears. Yeah.
If you can believe.
Of that, I think I have it down here.
That might be the longest title so far.
Yeah.
Just wait if somebody chooses the Kinks, Arthur, or the rise and decline of the British Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Gosh, this is so hard. There's so many.
First record I ever bought, actually, if you could believe your eyes and ears. That was the very first record I ever bought.
I know. Yeah. Nick is a big fan of that. Yeah.
First record I ever bought was the Eagles' Greatest Hits 1 and 2.
Okay.
Great records.
Even though I finally just got around to their studio albums this year.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go. This is my favorite Led Zeppelin album of the '60s, and that's Led Zeppelin 2, which Garrett.
They had so much Zeppelin albums in this.
Boo-doo, boo-doo-doo.
which Garrett mentioned Led Zeppelin already, so I'm gonna mention the second one, which is my second favorite Led Zeppelin album of all time. My favorite is in the 1970s, so that'll come at a later time. But in my opinion, some of their best rock riffs and rock music. I mean, it begins with maybe one of my favorite rock songs of all time, and maybe the greatest opener to an album, with a whole lot of love. When you get that, like it just gets my heart pumping. Like I feel like my heart's pumping faster, and I feel like if I was like, if I had to hype myself up for something, this was the song I'd play to hype myself up and go, all right, I'm ready to go. Like put me in, coach, that kind of thing. It's an absolutely amazing song. One of my favorite out of Led Zeppelin. But then you get Heartbreaker, amazing, great, one of the greatest guitar solos of all time. You got Ramble On, and then you got a slower song that I absolutely love. What Is and What Never Should Be, I believe is the name of it. It's a little bit slower, but it's absolutely amazing. And Robert Plant's voice is so good, as Nick mentioned. His voice just like I don't know if Robert Plant's voice would like work with the Beatles, but it's perfect for the Led Zeppelin. It's one of those things where it's like I don't know if I like his voice for other bands, but for Led Zeppelin, it's like perfect voice. The way he sings, it's just unique, I think. And obviously Jimmy Page, probably my second favorite guitar player behind Jimi Hendrix. I mean, the two Jimmys are just absolutely amazing.
Two Jimmys and an Eddie.
And yeah, oh yeah. And so yeah, it's one of the greatest rock albums of all time, Led Zeppelin 2, in my opinion. It's a must.
Okay, great album, of course. Very, very, very essential. Of course,
Yes.
This next album, I'm gonna have to show it through my Apple Music because I don't own the album, and it's sad because I love the album, and it's my second favorite album by the band. And it's not the band. Arthur, or
there it is. There's the album. Arthur, or the rise and fall or the rise and decline of the British Empire.
Here's the album.
You can just write down Arthur.
I'm gonna write down Arthur.
Yeah, that's right.
I love that album though. It's so good. I've only heard it once, but it's amazing.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a good
Yep. I'm glad you have a copy, Bryer.
It's actually the first Kinks album I bought.
It's amazing. I love it so much.
I love Australia.
Victoria, what a brilliant song to start off the record. I love that song. Then Yes Sir No Sir, very great anti-war song. Same with some other son. It's like some other son's lying in field, which is crazy. Just think about that, like war in general. Driving, which is a very upbeat song after a song about mothers losing their son to war. A lot of fans are not crazy. Like either you love it or you don't like it at all. And I'm part of that camp of people who really love the song. So Brainwash, which is cool, very great guitar work. Australia, which is my favorite Kinks song of all time. Weird has my favorite song, but it's my favorite Kinks song, but it's not my favorite Kinks album, which is
yeah, that's me with several bands. Like my favorite song by them isn't on my favorite album. Like The Police. My favorite album is Synchronicity, but my favorite song is Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic.
Yeah. Shangri-La, which is amazing. I love Shangri-La. Mr. Churchill Says is great. She's built a house like Princess Maria. I love that track. Love the can't think of the harpsichord. Great stuff. Young and Innocent Days is really good. Nothing to Say is amazing. And the title track, Arthur. Oh my God, it's such a great way to end off the album with such witty lyric. The whole album, you just gotta listen to the music, then listen to the lyrics. It's such a great album. I know you said you listened to it once, Garrett, but it's definitely an album you gotta listen to more than once. And
oh, definitely.
And you should also check out Something Else by the Kinks as well. That's another great album.
Wait, which album?
Something Else by the Kinks.
Yeah, I know another album, but which one?
Something Else by the Kinks. I know, but what else?
What else?
This isn't gonna be in my 13 albums because I only have 2 albums left, and I feel like these other two albums are more important, but you should also check out this album. You got through the first three, and this is the fourth album you should check out. But yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go with a band that we've talked about once that needs at least one more album on this list. It's the Beach Boys, and I'm going with the Beach Boys Today, which is kind of their Rubber Soul.
The Beach Boys Today?
Yes, it's my second, or no, it's my third. If you count Smile, it's my third favorite Beach Boys album.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that.
This album is to Pet Sounds as Rubber Soul is to Sgt. Pepper's. This is kind of when Brian had broken away from his father and was saying, hey guys, it's time to stop doing car surfing songs. Let's get serious. And the first half of the album is more happy-go-lucky songs like When I Grew Up to Be a Man, Do You Want to Dance, 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 songs like that. But then, even When I Grew Up to Be a Man is kind of a more mature song than they've done in the past. But you flip the album over, and instead of like Fun in the Sun songs, like they're love songs, but they're not like we're going to California and look at all the girls. It's like serious love songs, like
Okay.
oh, they're so good. Kiss Me Baby, She Knows Me Too Well. Just absolutely, that B-side to that album is absolutely amazing. Other than the last song called The Bull Session with the Big Daddy, which the record executive made them put on. It's a fake interview. Does not belong on the album at all. Oh, and there's this really great Dennis Wilson song called In the Back of My Mind on the B-side as well. It was written by Brian, but Dennis sings it. It's everything on that B-side other than that fake interview is almost as good as Pet Sounds. Almost.
Okay.
So definitely check that one out. That's definitely an essential album of the 1960s.
Okay.
If you love Pet Sounds,
Mhm.
you like the Beach Boys, but you're not as big into like the Fun in the Sun, surfing cars kind of Beach
Right.
Boys, and you want
Right.
something that sounds like Pet Sounds but isn't as weird as like Smiley Smile, then go check out the Beach Boys Today.
Okay,
All right.
so
Now, Garrett, you're what, 10th pick right now?
10th pick.
Where are we?
Or wait. I think I have two
11.
more.
11th
It's
pick.
11.
11.
I
getting
get two more. And if nobody
towards
picks
Bryer,
another
so-
Beatles album, I'm going to have to pick another Beatles album.
I know. You gotta make
I didn't pick a single Beatles album at all.
make these count, Brian.
all right. Where do I go next?
I know.
Yeah.
Where do
Oh.
we go now?
Yeah. All right. I'll talk about this album. So Jason already brought up this particular person before, and very famous guitar player. That of course is Jimi Hendrix.
All right.
Electric Ladyland.
All right. Great. Yeah, I love that album.
Yeah, his last full studio album. And this is pretty much his big artistic statement here.
If you don't like the inner sleeve to Queen's Jazz, do not look up the UK cover to that album.
Right, exactly. But yeah, this is probably his most experimental album. There's a ton of songs here. Again, a lot of great riffs. Again, a lot of great songs on here, and great drumming as well. Not so much bass because by this point I think Noel Redding was kind of checking out by this point. So, but Mitch Mitchell's drumming on here is spectacular throughout this whole album. Again, a lot of classic songs. I mean, you have two versions of Voodoo Child on it.
Yes.
So that's kind of still both really good. Still Raining, Still Dreaming is really nice. Have You Ever Been to Electric Ladyland is great. It's also really good. But of course, the big standout song is the one that gets played the most,
Yeah.
which is his rendition of All Along the Watchtower.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's another classic song of the 60s. I mean, when people think Jimi Hendrix, that's one song they bring up. But yeah, this one had to be mentioned. It's a long album, but it's a real experience. Huh? Anyhow,
The cover song
There we
that
go.
was so good that Bob Dylan started playing it like Jimi Hendrix live.
yes, yeah, exactly. Like the second he heard Jimmy's version, he was like, "Okay, this song's yours. You can have it."
All right. Some chats I haven't gone to yet. Keith says America's "I Need You" is great.
Okay. More
Early 1970s.
Yeah.
Says Lou Adler produced it.
Yeah, Lou Adler produced it, and plus he produced Mamas and the Papas and Carole King.
Okay, he says who produced Carole King's Tapestry album and produced Jan and Dean and Johnny Rivers too, and assorted artists and albums.
I mean, I feel like I keep thinking of Lou Adler because that's what I know.
Okay, I have no idea.
It's a continue. Lou Adler produced it. Who produced Carole King's? It's a continuation of his last one.
Okay.
Oh, is
Lou
it?
Adler produced it, comma, who produced Carole King's Tapestry album and produced Jane and Dean.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's not a question.
Okay.
It's a continuation of his last one.
Okay, I got you. Lou Adler produced it. Who produced Carole King's? Okay, that makes much more sense. I was confused by that.
Yeah.
And then he says the Mamas and Papas also. Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. All right, with my 11th pick, I'm getting down to my last two picks. I'm like, oh my gosh, where do I go with this? Because I mentioned the Beatles, but I have to because they just made so many great albums in this time period, and so I don't think I can go away without mentioning Help on this list, which is their fifth album, coming after Beatles for Sale, which many believe is one of the worst albums, though I like that album as well. And this is kind of during a period where they're kind of transitioning, I feel like, from, like Garrett mentioned, A Hard Day's Night. That's definitely like the quintessential like early Beatles sound, I think. And they're very catchy pop kind of sound, rock sound, with, all these, I Love You and all this kind of stuff. And you get to Help, and it's starting to transition a little bit into more of folk rock era, and definitely getting some influence from Bob Dylan, especially with You Can't Hide Your Love Away. That feels like a Bob Dylan song when you listen to it. To me, I'm like, man, Bob Dylan could write the song. To me, that's how good they were getting at writing. I think John and Paul especially were writing some really great stuff. And definitely this was like right when they're smoking marijuana, so that was starting to influence them as well on the album. And you got, to me, this is like my third favorite Beatles album. Absolutely love this album. Every song is great. I love it all the way through. Help, the opener, Help, great rock song to open it up. Also has my favorite song of all time, Yesterday. So I feel like I had to put this album on here because it has my favorite song. I absolutely love that song. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. The first song that they really put orchestra music to, and it's really a Paul McCartney solo song because he's the only one that sings on it. It's just him and acoustic guitar and orchestra music, and it's the most beautiful song ever. Great melody, beautifully written song about kind of loss and stuff like that, and wishing you go back in the past. Just amazing. It's the most famous probably Beatles song of all time. Been covered so many times, anyways. But yeah, it's a great album full of great pop songs, but also great ballads like that. Ticket to Ride, I believe, is on this album. Great rock song, one of the greatest. I think it's got one of my first favorite George Harrison songs. I Need You, I think, is a great song. It really shows George Harrison starting to get better at songwriting, and it's got that great guitar sound that he has on that I love. But yeah, through and through, it's absolute great kind of middle Beatles period, in my opinion.
Lizzie Miss Dizzy should have never been the last song on the album.
They should not have had that.
That shouldn't have even been on the album.
No, it's almost. I mean, it's almost a. It's got that, and it's got the Ringo song is also a cover song.
I like the Ringo song though. It suits his voice well.
Yeah, it fits him very well. And anyways, but yeah, Dismiss Lizzie, I could have done without. Yesterday would have been a great closer to the album.
If you like that sort of thing where it's like they're in a band, but it's kind of like a solo song, I'd say check out Fifi the Flea by the Hollies. It's Graham Nash. It's him and just the acoustic guitar, and
oh yeah,
it's a great song, and it's very, very much like Yesterday, where it's just Graham Nash singing. And if you want a song that's very similar to Yesterday in terms of just like a song that could have been a solo song, then definitely check out Fifi the Flea by the Hollies. But Garrett mentioned this way back, like, oh, Nick's going to mention this album sometime. And here you go. I finally mentioned it.
US or UK version. They're both good.
Yes, I picked the UK version. There's the US
Just
version.
talk about all of the tracks and then throw Paint It Black in. And there we go.
Yes.
Well,
But, first track on the album, right away, you get a great track right off the bat. Mother's Little Helper. What a great song to open up a record. And then you get Stupid Girl, which is a funny track. It's like if it was released nowadays, right away the Rolling Stones would get canceled.
Well, the thing is, the Rolling Stones were pressured by their manager, Andrew Oldham, to be the bad. Like Jason was saying earlier, it was either Jason or Bryer. One of them was saying that they were pressured by their manager to be the bad, like the anti-Beatles, and so
Yeah, right.
they have all these, like, oh, my girl's treating me wrong, she's a piece of garbage kind of songs, because they wanted to be seen as the bad boys.
Yep. Lady Jane's a really good song about drugs. Under My Thumb is another song that would definitely get canceled if it was released.
That's a great one,
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
I like that one.
I like
do 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 do
Yep.
do, and the marimba that Brian Jones plays on that.
Brilliant. Don't You Bother Me is a great track. I love that track with the slide guitar by Brian Jones. Going Home, it's a huge problem that it's slapped dead in the middle of the album, but I still quite like it.
That's why I like the US version, because it's the last song on the album where it belongs.
It's kind of like the same problems I had with the US Who My Generation is the track listing problems. Is my only problem with this version is the track listing. And if they would have taken out Going Home and had Painted Black, which was on the US version, and some other songs that was on
Nervous Breakdown.
19 Nervous Breakdown, Saying on a Fence, which is another great song. If they had those three songs on the album, it would have been a lot better. But yeah, that ends up side one. Side two opens up with Flight 505, which is great. High and Dry, which is a great song, very underrated. Pardon me. It's Not That Easy. I don't know. It's not. I don't know why I said that. It's Not Easy is a great track. I'm Waiting's very slow. I like it. Take It or Leave It's brilliant. Think is really fun. I really like it. What to Do should have been on the Flowers album. I don't know why it wasn't. I showed it to Garrett the first time and he agreed. He's like, yeah.
What's with these bands putting repeat tracks on their US albums instead of using some of these B-sides or other songs they have in the back?
Yeah, and Flowers had the problem with that, and Magic Bus had that problem with that. Like instead of having Let's Spend the Night Together and Ruby Tuesday again, they could have had more songs that they didn't have on their albums. What to Do is definitely one of them. And for Magic Bus, they could have had Substitute on there. I'm a Boy on there.
I'm a boy.
Anyway, Anyhow, Anywhere on it. Dogs. There's like, it's crazy. They had the potential of putting those songs on there, but then they just.
I Can't Explain.
I can't explain it. It's crazy. But yeah, that's my number 12 choice. Aftermath, the UK version. In stereo, believe it or not, I prefer it in. Because it's more muddy, and for the Rolling Stones, it fits them better. Because
I got the US mono version. That's the one I've
Here's
got.
the thing, though, is that like the thing about it is that the Rolling Stones are supposed to be the anti-Beatles, and when the Rolling Stones have like a clean sound, it doesn't fit them as much. So when I listen to the mono version, I'm like, I thought they're supposed to be the anti-Beatles. They sound
well. You got that new box set. Mine is an old beat up. Well, the cover is actually in really good condition, but it's in a like beat up copy from the 60s, and it sounds like you think the Stones should when you play it.
Yeah. A bunch of, I mean, the other mono, like even Between the Buttons and their Satanic Majesty's Request, like their other like mono records are a lot better than Aftermath. Like for some odd reason, I can't listen to Aftermath mono for some reason. It's just not the same. But yeah, that's all I'm done spewing about this album. Yeah.
All right. I got Garrett, your 12th pick?
Give me just 1 second.
Okay. Get into the nitty gritty here.
Yep, the first album on within the Holly style. Nitty gritty.
No.
That's for you, Nick. No, that's Stay with the Hollies. That is the bad one.
Yeah,
But
in the Holly style is the album.
I'm going with 1968 Bookends by Simon and Garfunkel.
All right. Yes.
That one had to be on there. The first side is kind of a little mini concept album about kind of like a life cycle. Save the Life of My Child. And then you get America, which is an amazing song. You get these songs about growing old. Overs, which is like a hauntingly amazing song. And you get Old Friends / Bookends theme. The only one I'm not too crazy about is the voices of old people. It fits the concept of the album well, but it should have just been like 30 seconds of that rather than a whole 2.5 minutes or whatever it was. If it would have been just a few seconds of it, it would have been a lot better. And then the B-side is some of the outtakes from The Graduate, like some of the songs they wrote for the Graduate movie, as well as some of their other songs they were writing about this time. You got Mrs. Robinson is the most famous one, but you've also got A Hazy Shade of Winter and At the Zoo. So it's a great Simon and Garfunkel album. I do probably like Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme more now that I've listened to that one more. It's an absolutely amazing album, and Jason already mentioned that one, but I had to put Bookends on. I've only got 2 picks left, and so I was either going to go with Sounds of Silence or Bookends, and I think Bookends barely edges it out, even though the song, The Sound of Silence, is definitely one of my favorite songs of the 1960s. Yeah. The album is still amazing, but I don't think it's probably not quite as good as some of the other ones I've listed, even though I own that album and I love that album, and it would definitely be in my top 100 albums of the 60s.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked that. That was on my list. I was like, I hope we get to bookends, so good. All right, Bryer, this is your last pick, right?
Last pick.
All right. All right, how are you going to end your list?
All right, I have 4 options. I can either end on a conventional note, or I should end on more weird stuff. Any preferences?
I would say conventional because this is the top albums of the 1950s.
True.
But it is your choice.
Yeah, true. But then again, this weird stuff to many people would say is essential.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man.
We can leave whatever you don't pick as your honorable mention.
Yeah, we can do that. All right.
It's very hard when we get to the end here. There's still some albums on my list. I'm like, oh no, I didn't get to these.
I mean, look how much I have honorable mentions I have here.
I know.
Yeah, there's so many albums I wanted to pick too, but it's like, oh man, I don't have enough.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, too much. I mean.
Okay, I'm gonna go weird. I'm gonna go weird.
Okay.
To finish out. All right. So, obviously, to many people who love psychedelic music, this is a must listen to.
Okay.
And I know maybe a couple of us aren't big into this album. I'm kind of more in the middle. It's not my favorite by this band, but to many people, it's definitely a very influential in the psychedelic movement. I'm going to Pink Floyd.
Love the band, hate the
album. Go! I love that album. That's my second favorite Pink Floyd album. Let's go.
Yes.
I love that album. Bravo, Bryer.
So it's called
their debut album.
Piper
at the Gates of Dawn.
I'll pull up the writing for you, but
it sounds nothing like Dark Side of the Moon or whatever.
The only reason why I wanted to put it on my list, but it's 50 essential albums, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna hope that someone picks either Saucerful or Piper. But yep, here's the title of the album in its entirety.
Yeah. So yeah, like Garrett says, it sounds nothing like what we typically think of Pink Floyd. This was led by Syd Barrett because he was essentially the band leader at this point. He wrote all the songs, he helped compose everything. But yeah, it's very psychedelic. It's very bizarre. The lyrically, it's very it's taking a lot of almost like fairy tale influence. It's very whimsical. But there's still some very cool moments. I mean, to me, it's an album I need to be in the right mood for if I want to hear it. But when I'm in the right mood, I think there's some great moments. Like it starts out very good with Astronomy Domain. I probably butchered that, but that first song's good. Then you have
Astronomy Domine.
Yeah, that's it. Then you have Lucifer Sam.
I was in choir in college, and my choir professor would drill it into our heads. It's not Domine, it's Domine, because we had to sing in Latin. So it's Astronomy Domine.
All right, I'll probably forget that, but I'll take your word for it. All right. Anyhow, so Lucifer Sam's really good. I think that's a really good song. Of course, let me see. Matilda Mother's good. Flaming, I like. Interstellar Overdrive, which is kind of like the jam song, which is they're just jamming, and it has its moments. I kind of like it. I like it. Again, if you're in the right mood for it. Then you have, again, going back to that whimsical stuff, the gnome. So yeah, it has stuff like that. You have Chapter 24, and it closes out with Bike, which is a pretty well-known song from the early period.
That song is so weird.
I heard that song before. Yeah, it's a weird one.
It's either a song you really like or you hate.
The last minute and a half of that song.
Yeah.
Like, what are you on right now, Sid Barrett?
Exactly. Yeah. So, of course, this is although he did appear on the next album, Sauce Full of Secrets, but this is kind of like the only album where he was fully focused, because after this he would totally go off the rail in terms of his mental state. But yeah, to many people, I mean, there's some people who think the psychedelic stuff is some of Pink Floyd's best. I don't agree with it, but of course Nick agrees with that. But
guitar player here, and David Gilmour is so much better than Sid Barrett. I'm sorry if any of you people are like, that's the real Pink Floyd, but for me, the Pink Floyd from Metal through The Wall is their best stuff, because David Gilmour's guitar so good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, the music is more, it's still experimental, it's just more relatable, if that makes sense.
You got to check out Obscured by Clouds and Adam Hart Mother.
All that psychedelic stuff is just too out there, but it feels like Pink Floyd's other stuff is very human, if that makes sense. Like, The Dark Side of the Moon is all about the human experience. Wish You Were Here is about longing for someone, which is a tribute to Sid Barrett, which is weird that I like the tribute more than the actual thing. I haven't listened to Animals. I need to. I have listened to Metal, though. Echoes is incredible. That's talking about like human emotions at the end. And then The Wall, kind of talking about how you need human contact, because if you isolate yourself, you're just going to go crazy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, here's the thing, though, is that Animals was the thing that made The Wall thing, because they're in the
Pink Floyd in the Flesh tour. Yeah, like when Roger Waters got so upset that he spit on somebody.
Yeah,
there were firecrackers in front of him.
They were climbing on the stage, you know, he was just so frustrated because, back then their fans were more civil, because it was more like they weren't like rock stars at the time. Like they were just making great music. Well, they were just making music, and people would go to the shows and be respectful. And once they became rock stars like Led Zeppelin, The Who, they're like, that's when they started attracting bad crowds, and that's when Roger Waters started to get really pissed off, and that's when he envisioned The Wall, and that's when that album came. And I have my opinions on that album. It's great, but it's too much of a Roger Waters solo album.
We'll get to that album when we get to the 70s.
That is, I'm sure that one of us other three is going to have that one on our 70s list.
Bryer, that's gonna be like
we'll save that one for Bryer, because it's personal for him. I know he likes that one a lot.
I have Queen albums and I have Who albums so far. Of course, I'm gonna have more albums than that. Like I'm gonna have George Harrison and all that, but as of right now, as my list goes, it's gonna be mostly made up of Queen and Who and a lot of George Harrison. I'm
gonna have a lot of the big albums of the 70s on my list.
Yeah,
gonna be big ones.
I think I'm gonna be the one that represents more of the later 70s stuff.
Breyer's gonna be the progressive rock guy with his Genesis,
more hard rock type of thing.
Yeah. Breyer's first pick is gonna be Queen album. That's gonna be like The Wall after that. I swear.
He's gonna go with Queen 2. I can guarantee it.
Yeah.
My first pick is gonna be either Sheer Heart Attack or A Day at the Races.
Yeah. We're gonna cover a lot of Queen, I think.
My first pick is gonna be the one that I'm gonna steal from Nick. I'm gonna steal Who's Next.
I'll say I'm like
It's like, go for it. You
all I'm
take
hoping
it.
for, I'm like take it, but I'm hoping that all the Who gets covered, like all the Who, like 60s,
Toss
70s.
up with Who's Next or Out of the Blue is my favorite album of the 70s.
Yeah, Quadrophenia is gonna be my second choice though.
That's a good. I need to get that record. I don't know why I don't have. Well, I know why I didn't pick it up before. It's because of the Dr. Jimmy song. But everything else on that album is great.
Say that those are the only two albums that I really want to have for me to pick is Day of the Races and Quadrophenia, because those are my two favorite albums of the 70s.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. Piper the Gates of Dawn. Give it a listen.
Love that album.
Definitely Breyer's got some, I don't want to say out there picks. They're good picks, but it's good because it definitely helps show everybody there's so many different sounds of the 60s. So I like that Bryer picks some, and Nick too. He picks some of these albums I'm not as familiar with, so that's good. So we cover a lot of different things.
I pick a lot of the popular choices.
Me too. I picked the popular ones
just because I like them.
It's called 50 essential albums of the 1960s. Like we need to have at least one or two people that have.
I had a few weird picks. I don't think anybody else would have put Between the Buttons by the Stones.
No, right, yeah.
Instead of like, what's that other one? Beggar's Banquet. They would have probably had that one instead.
Yeah.
The weird ones I picked, like they're weird, but in terms of their individual genres, then they're pretty high regarded. Like and the
definitely.
Stuff like
My
that.
list is the weirdest because it doesn't have a single Beatles album on it.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe this 13th album pick might be a
we got one pick for you.
Hey, I didn't pick a Beatles one either.
You did? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because I was like, I'll leave it to the experts on top.
Yeah, we leave it to
me and Garrett are gonna cover.
I'm gonna have to do a Beatles song for my last one.
Keith says Capitol butchered the Help album released in America.
Yeah, that album sucks.
I know it's a lot of
instrumental
music, I think.
It does have the benefit of having the cool James Bond intro Help, but that's about it.
Capitol Records did improve Rubber Soul by adding songs from Help album to make it sound more folk.
That's the one that Brian Wilson heard.
Oh, really?
It has, instead of Drive My Car, it has I've Just Seen a Face, and instead of What Goes On, it has It's Only Love.
Yeah, great songs.
But it doesn't have Nowhere Man is my biggest problem with it.
Oh man, Nowhere Man.
But the good news is all of the good songs that they took off are on Yesterday and Today, which is my favorite U.S. album. If you don't count Magical Mystery Tour, then Yesterday Today is my favorite of the U.S. ones.
All right, Keith says T for the Tiller Man and Teaser and the Fire Cat by Cat Stevens. Oh, that's 1970s. Yeah. All right, so I got one more pick left. I opened my pick with the Beatles album, and I'm going to close it with the Beatles album. And this is actually the self-titled Beatles album. But
there we go. I was hoping you'd pick that one.
We refer to it as the White Album, famously, from 1968, kind of towards the later Beatles. Definitely, if you don't like experimental music, this is Beatles at their most experimental. These are songs that you would not put on a Beatles album, except for the White Album was the album that they're like, we're going to throw everything out there. And it's not
the kitchen sink album.
Yes. It's not going to sound like the Beatles, but it's still going to be great somehow at the same time. Like, I don't know how they did it, but I mean, it's got the most variety. It's a double album. It's the only double album. So it's 30 songs, which I would argue, people would argue, yeah, it would be even better if they would have cut it down to like 24 or something like that. There's maybe 6 songs I don't like on this album, but yeah, it doesn't ruin the album for me somehow at the same time. It's one of my favorite out of the Beatles. Obviously, Revolution 9, throw that out. Honey Pie, Wild Honey Pie, throw that out. But still, you got one of my favorite Beatles songs of all time, one of George Harrison's greats, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Absolutely amazing song. And you got Eric Clapton playing the solo, amazing solo in it.
It's impressive. They Eric Clapton was popular because of Cream. He was with Cream, and he was making.
Was he at that time?
They were making their amazing double album, which I'm going to bring up right now.
Is that just Billy Gears, or is that a different one?
Wheels of Fire.
Okay, Wheels of Fire.
Yep. Which
half studio and half
If we were
live.
doing a top 100 albums list, this would have been in it, but I bought this on my birthday. I love it. It's very close to me. While it's funny, it's great because while they were making this masterpiece of an album,
Yeah.
George Harrison was like, "Hey, Eric Clapton, you mind doing guitar on this song?" And if you listen to Cream and then you listen to that song, you'd be like, "Yeah,
Sounds like Eric.
This sounds like an Eric Clapton type guitar thing."
Well, when you're talking about like the greatest guitar players of all time, they come around the late '60s period for me. Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton. I mean, those are some of the greats from the psychedelic era, I would say. Right? Yeah, around that era. But yeah, so cool. Eric Clapton comes in on that song. Blackbird's one of the greatest acoustic guitar ballads, whatever you want to call it. I love playing that on the guitar. I don't know about you, Garrett. It's a fun song to play. That picking pattern is absolutely amazing. Paul's just great with that one. But it's got so many crazy songs. I mean, you definitely got psychedelic in there. Happiness is a Warm Gun is such a weird song, but I love it.
Oh, that's John Lennon's Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 3 songs in one that he put together. And it's got doo-wop, it's got psychedelic. It's just crazy. But you know, you got like sing-along songs like "Hey Buffalo Bill," Buffalo Bill. I'm missing
Bungalow Bill.
Bungalow Bill.
What did you kill Bungalow Bill?
Bungalow Bill. It's like a sing-along song. It's great. You have Rocky Raccoon, which is this weird kind of Western country-ish song, and it's great. And you got everybody's trying to hide. Wait a minute.
Everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey.
Craziest title for a song. Great rock song. And Garrett mentioned probably the heaviest song the Beatles ever did, and one of the heaviest I've ever heard. Helter Skelter. Still to this day.
I think Nick was the one who mentioned.
I was the one who mentioned.
Oh, Nick was. Sorry, Nick.
The very
he was talking about "I Can See for Miles."
Your last album, I referred to it on my very first album on my list, Husella, when we were going over "I Can See for Miles." He's like, "Oh, this is the roughest, toughest song we ever did," and Paul McCartney took it a little personal. He's like, "Yeah, that's the roughest, toughest song."
Oh.
And then he throws out Helter Skelter.
Paul McCartney hadn't even heard the song at the time. I think when Paul McCartney finally heard the song, he was like, "Oh, that sounded completely different than I thought." Because "I Can See for Miles" it's kind of hard rock for the time, but it's not exactly the most heaviest. Like I think Paul McCartney, Helter Skelter is more what he was imagining. "I Can See for Miles" sounded like.
"I Could See for Miles" to me is like is what I consider to be Pete Townshend's King Midas in reverse, because he was so upset when it didn't hit number 1. Like Pete Townshend's like, "This is going to be the best thing ever. It's going to be amazing. It's going to go number 1." And when it didn't go number 1 at all, I don't even think it went top 10. And he was like so upset. He's like, "Oh,
that is upsetting.
What the heck?" Same with King Midas in reverse. Like Graham Nash is like, "Oh, this could be the next big number 1," and then it went very low on the charts, and Graham Nash was like, "Oh, man." But
yeah. So the White Album to me is just so far removed from "Please Please Me," and still absolutely amazing the way they threw everything out there, and it works so well. And so it's a different album, but I put it in essentials. It's just a masterpiece.
Hey, at least someone mentioned the White Album.
Yeah, well, I had one more pick, and I was like, I gotta go with the White Album.
Yep. Well, before
now, Nick, you got one more pick.
I have one honorable pick, and yesterday and today, just going over it. Drive My Car, I'm Only Sleeping, Nowhere Man. Yesterday, Andy Birkenstein, If I Need Someone, and it includes that amazing double A-side single, We Could Work It Out, and Day Tripper. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that one.
Okay.
It's the best U.S. Beatles album.
Yeah, besides Magical Mystery Tour.
Besides Magical Mystery Tour.
But here is my actual number 1. For Certain Because by the Hollies.
For certain because.
Okay. I love this record. And it's formatted like the Beatles for Sale album, where it's like that with the record. It's really cool. I love it. First album with all the songs being written by the band. All great. This is like the first like really great album. They had this is their first like perfect album. they had a really good album in the early 60s, 64 to be exact. It was called In the Holly Style, and they were starting to write a lot of songs for their albums, but then like it didn't chart as high as their first album, Stay with the Hollies, which is crazy. And they were like, let's go with more covers. So their third and fourth album, they were more based on covers. And then finally, I'm assuming it was Pet Sounds that influenced them because it's a very Pet Soundsy sounding album. Graham Nash was like, you know what? Let's write all of our songs now. And they did. What's Wrong with the Way I Live is amazing. Pay You Back with Interest is great. Tell Me to My Face is an amazing song. Clown is great. Just Look in Your Eyes is my favorite song on the album. It's You is great. High Class is pretty good. Peculiar Situations really good. What Went Wrong is amazing. Very Tom Jones-esque. Crusader's amazing. Don't Ever Think About Changing is decent. And of course, it includes the big hit single off of it, Stop, Stop, Stop.
Oh, stop. Yep.
Great song. And I'm proud to say I included the 3 Big Hollies records in my top 50 albums.
The Who, the
Hollies, check out those 3 albums. Those are
Small Faces.
I think Small Faces, Rolling Stones, we definitely covered some of their big ones, at least.
I wanted to include the Small Faces debut album, but I wouldn't consider it to be essential.
The only essential Rolling Stones album we missed was Beggar's Banquet and maybe Out of Our Heads. But that one's mainly just because it's got Satisfaction on it.
I wouldn't consider it to be essential. But here's the Beggar's Banquet, the original album cover that was going to be on it.
I like the white. I think I like the white invitation cover better. I don't know.
Yeah. It reminds me of the White Album strongly.
That's probably why.
Garrett, you get the distinction of picking the very last song that we're going to put in our 50s album, 50 albums.
Oh boy, I'm last.
You are last.
Get one more. Okay, well,
no pressure.
Let's end with the Beatles.
All right,
because that's the one I had in my head.
Good.
Let's go with Magical Mystery Tour. Yep. It was a U.S. album. It was just a EP in the U.K., but it's an official Beatles album now. I think we need to include this one just because of if for nothing else, the incredible B-side with all those singles. Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane are perhaps the 2 best songs they ever did.
Yeah.
Hello, Goodbye, and All You Need Is Love are amazing. Baby You're a Rich Man is great. And then the songs from the Weird TV movie are still really good. The best one being I Am the Walrus. But Fool on the Hill is also great. The title track, Magical Mystery Tour. And then Your Mother Should Know. I really like that one. It's kind of a more old school sounding song, like 1940s kind of thing, but I really like it. And then there's 2 songs I'm not really particularly fond of, Flying and Blue Jay Way, but the rest of the album is great. And it definitely deserves to be in the essentials just because someone described it very well. It's like they said it's DLC for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
I like that. That's a good one.
Because Strawberry Fields Forever is probably my favorite Beatles song. It's a toss up between that and Something.
So good, yeah.
But definitely needed to be on there just for those Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane at least.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
I'm happy you picked that because I had between the White Album and Magical Mystery Tour were like my last 2. I'm like, oh no, which
we at least had to get all those. I mean, I would have liked to get Please Please Me in there just because of its historical significance as their first album, but hey, we got a lot of other good albums in there.
I think we only missed, I want to say 3 Beatle albums maybe.
Yeah, and 2 of them was Yellow Submarine and Beatles for Sale. So
yeah, and with the Beatles, which are towards the bottom of my list.
Yeah,
Beatle albums. So I'm happy with what we got with the Beatles. I didn't think we'd get all of them in. That'd be too much maybe, but we got quite a bit in, which I'm glad because.
So were you gonna read the full list now that we got it all?
I'm just satisfied we had we had all 5 Who albums.
All of the Who's 60s albums made it.
My favorite band of all time, so I'm happy with that. And
most of the Beatles albums.
You guys have any albums you thought would get in that didn't get in, or?
Sounds of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah.
Yeah, Disraeli Gears by Cream. That was another
Yeah.
one I had on.
Yeah.
If I wouldn't have picked Magical Mystery Tour, that would have been there. Bayou Country by CCR. Headquarters by the Monkees.
Yeah, we didn't get any Monkees in. I had some on my list, but
man,
some other Beach Boys albums. All Summer Long, in particular, is the other one I wanted on there.
I have 5 albums. I have a lot more, but I have 5 that I'm thinking of right now.
Yeah.
I have the Mamas and Papas self-titled album, Wheels of Fire by Cream. I mentioned briefly before. There is this one record, that amazing debut album for garage bands, the Trogs from Nowhere.
Wild Thing.
I love Wild
on it. The whole record is such a great time capsule for like British underground groups of the time. I also had the Byrds, Notorious Byrd Brothers. Like I said, it was a toss-up between Younger Than Yesterday or that. And last but not least is this great underrated Liverpool group from the 60s. If I could find the record. The Mersey Beats.
the Mercy Beats. Okay.
Which has a big song on it, Don't Turn Around. But if you want to me, this is the best pre-psychedelic / pre like out of all the British Invasion, Beatlemania albums, this is probably my favorite out of all of them.
I'm surprised Nick hasn't mentioned Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond. I know he likes that album.
Oh yeah,
That's a good album.
Yeah, Neil Diamond had a great album called Sweet Caroline. All his 60s albums are really good. Check out Neil Diamond's 60s albums.
Yeah,
thanks for reminding me about that, Garrett. But check out all the Mamas and Papas records too. All 4 of the 60s albums. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now.
Yeah, I just go through. I'm not gonna go through every single one.
I think you got a lot there, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on them, I just had them just in case. But here's some. I'll just go through some other ones I would have put in. But of course, I briefly mentioned, but the music from Big Pink from the band, I would put up there. For more Bob Dylan, for more of his early stuff, of course, Free Will and Bob Dylan, and Times That Are Changing. Jefferson Airplane, Surrealistic Pillow.
Yeah, that's one I was surprised didn't get on there, but yeah.
Yeah. I'll put this one in. Joni Mitchell with Clouds, her second album. Cheap Thrills by Big Brother and the Holding Company with Janis Joplin. Of course, it has Pieces of My Heart on it.
Janis Joplin. Yeah.
And I have to censor this one, but Blind Faith with their first and only album.
You can just get the one that has the other cover on it.
Ginger Baker. Ginger Baker.
Exactly. Van Morrison, Astral Weeks.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. We missed that.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'll throw on two jazz fusion albums. Jazz fusion. So Frank Zappa with Hot Rats.
Frank Zappa.
And last one I'll do is Miles Davis with In a Silent Way.
Okay.
I watched the video of Frank Zappa performing with Pink Floyd doing Interstellar Overdrive, which if you ever look that up, it has nothing to do with that Interstellar Overdrive. They just said, yeah, we're playing Interstellar Overdrive, but it's just Richard Wright going crazy on the keyboards and Frank Zappa playing the guitar. And I had a fever the one time and I was listening to that track and I was just like, whoa.
Well, then you might actually like Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart because it was produced by Frank Zappa.
Okay.
It's a terrible album, though. It's
crazy that besides Frank Zappa, everyone was like super high on something, and Frank Zappa was the only one who forgot about jamming with Pink Floyd. And he was like, I performed Pink Floyd. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I've heard Frank Zappa. I never heard of Frank Zappa song before in my life, but
that's a whole can of worms because he's like made so many albums.
He has a band, the
Mothers of Invention.
Mothers of Invention, yeah. I know. I just now thinking the Grateful Dead is one people talk about.
Oh yeah, they're more of a live act than studio album.
I have like I have like 3 studio albums by them, but yeah, they're mostly known for as a live band.
I've never heard a song from them, but people talk about it. I know that. But yeah, I wanted to get Another Side of Bob Dylan on there. Couldn't get there, but I think Highway 61 Revisited and Blonde Blonde are must. So I'm glad we got those 2 on there. So I'm okay. I'm okay that we got those 2 on there. I wanted to get Daydream from Lovin' Spoonful on there, but didn't get around to that. Or Do You Believe in Magic? I do like those 2 albums from Lovin' Spoonful. Surristic Pillow. I'm surprised I'm not a fan necessarily of that album, but it's like a great psychedelic album, probably that people think about.
I wouldn't consider that to be psychedelic. Their following album after that is psychedelic.
Okay.
After Baxter's, like Bathing in Baxter's, whatever that album is, it was supposed to be like an LSD drug pun, and it was basically Surrealistic Pillow is like their breakthrough album, and the following album's like their, hey, this is what our album would sound like if we did a bunch of drugs. And it's a very fun album, but continue.
I couldn't get Neil Young in here. Everybody knows This Is Nowhere is a great album.
Oh yeah.
But I have some albums from the 70s. I've definitely get in there for Neil Young. Please Please Me was the only Beatles album we didn't get on, which is, it's fine. It's a good album though. Again, Buffalo Springfield again, another good album.
That's my favorite album of theirs.
I'm glad I got Buffalo Springfield on there because that's definitely one I wanted to get on. Turn, 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 another great Birds album. But we got a couple Birds albums on. We got at least
Mr. Tambourine Man on there. And then we got the other one that Nick did.
Yeah.
Nick got a couple on there. I think.
Younger Than Yesterday, and I wanted to mention this album, the
Notorious Bird Brothers.
What's great about that album is that all the songs like flow into each other. So
Yeah.
Oh man, now I really need to check that album out.
yeah, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah,
Me and Bryer will give our opinions on it. Though.
Okay, so my takeaway from today: listen to that and Love Supreme by Coltrane.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I would love to get Sounds of Silence on there, but we got
Me
2
too.
good Simon Garfunkel albums on there, so I'm happy with that. I'm not a Rolling Stones fan, but I know Beggar's Banquet's popular, so I was surprised we didn't get that on there. But you guys got other ones, I guess, that you like more, so that's
I
fine.
don't know why it throws me off every time I see that toilet cover because I'm so used to that white invitation cover. When I hear Beggar's Banquet, I can see that in my head, and then people show the toilet, and it just throws me off.
This is to be ironic, I guess.
Me and Garrett made it obvious that our favorite Rolling Stones period is the one where
1966 to 1967 with Brian Jones.
Yeah, that's our favorite era.
Actually, I'll just throw it out. 1967 to 1965 to 1971 is their golden period for me. It's Out of Our Heads Through Sticky Fingers.
I feel like everybody talks about Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed, Sticky Fingers, Exile Main Street. That's like the 4.
I hate that album. I'm sorry. I don't care what you guys say. I hate that album, Exile on Main Street. It's so long and it goes nowhere.
It's the most overrated album of theirs. I don't like it either.
You love it, yeah.
It's got a few good songs on it though. Tumbling Dice.
It's loaded and it's horrible. An double album that did grow on me though, which it's gonna be a 70s album I'm gonna pick. It's Physical Graffiti. It's my favorite.
Oh yeah.
Now. Like that album grows.
I think that album is number 3 for me now.
Oh, is In Through the Outdoor number 4 now?
Yeah.
Okay. Don't blame you. It's my favorite Rolling Stones album. So,
wait, Physical Graffiti is your favorite Rolling Stones album? Did Mick Jagger played with Zeppelin?
Yep. You didn't know that.
I just imagine that.
Sorry.
Boom, boom, boom. I am a traveler of time and space.
I accidentally revealed it to everyone.
We're driving through Kashmir. I can't do Mick Jagger.
It's a Rolling Stones album. I'm sorry to admit that to everyone. No one's gonna think of it the same now.
So we got 9 Beatles albums on here. That's the most dominant, which I figured would be. There's probably there's not another decade that's gonna be dominated that much by one band, but it's the Beatles. You had to.
I mean, if there was more Who albums, I would have picked more Who albums, but
we got the Who might be the second most albums on here.
Yeah. We're gonna have a lot of Who albums in the 70s though, because they just get even better.
I said we haven't hit the 70s. We got these Who albums.
Once we get to the 70s, you're gonna hear a lot of Who by me and Garrett.
I'm pretty sure that between the 60s list and the 70s list, we're probably gonna get most, if not all, of the Who albums.
I will
at least up to Who Are You?
Well, I'm gonna.
I will say when we get to the
80s list. For the 80s list, my first two albums is gonna be the two Who albums of the 80s. Face Dances and It's Hard, which It's Hard's an amazing album with Eminence front. So I'll get more into those two albums.
My first pick of the 80s is going to be Moving Pictures, so please nobody steal that one. I have to talk about that. It's my favorite album of the 80s.
Yeah, just like Garrett saying not to steal that one. Please, if anyone doesn't, please don't steal Quadrophenia by the Who, because
I won't. Now. Who's next? I'm gonna steal that one. But
yeah, I'm encouraging you to steal that one because I ranked it kind of low on my list, and I think you'll give it more justice.
Yeah, I will say when we get to the 70s, I don't think you'll be able to see my computer screen.
Oh yeah, the 70s is insane. My list is it's just insane.
The 70s is my decade.
So
there's gonna be so many albums I'm gonna leave off my list. I'm gonna be upset about. But
Yeah,
that's the way
that was me with the 60s. I was so upset with how much albums I had to leave off.
All right,
let's hear the list. Let's hear the list.
All right, number 1, The Who Sell Out by The Who. Number 2, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. 3, Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. 4, Revolver by the Beatles. 5, Ogden's Not Gun Flake by Small Faces. Hope I said that right. 6, Odyssey and Oracle by the Zombies. 7, The Doors by the Doors. 8, Crosby, Stills and Nash by Crosby, Stills and Nash. 9, The Village Green Preservation Society by the Kinks. 10, Led Zeppelin by Led Zeppelin. 11, Let It Bleed by Rolling Stones. 12, Mr. Tambourine Man by the Byrds. 13, Evolution by the Hollies. 14, Between the Buttons by the Rolling Stones. 15, In the Court of Crimson King by Crimson King.
King Crimson.
King Crimson, sorry. I knew I was going to mess up. King Crimson, yeah. Number 16, Highway 61 Revisited by Bob Dylan. Number 17, Magic Bus by The Who. 18, Tommy by The Who. 19, Willie and the Poor Boys by CCR, or Creative Clearance Revival. Number 20, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme by Simon and Garfunkel. Number 21, Small Faces by the Small Faces. 22, My Generation by The Who. 23, The Band by The Band. 24, Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix. 25, Younger Than Yesterday by The Byrds. 26, Green River by CCR. 27, The Velvet Underground and Nico by The Velvet Underground and Nico. 28, Rubber Soul by The Beatles. 29, Something Else by the Kinks. That's weird to say.
Hey, Something Else by the Kinks.
By the Kinks.
By that band, I can't remember.
Who is 30? That by again?
By who?
No, not the Who, the Kinks.
The Who.
Oh, okay.
Yes. No, not yes. 30, A Hard Day's Night by the Beatles. 31, Blonde on Blonde by Bob Dylan. Number 32, Abbey Road by the Beatles. Number 33, A Quick One by The Who. 34, The Chicago Transit Authority by Chicago. Number 35, Supreme Love by John Coltrane.
I love Supreme.
What was it?
I love Supreme.
You can hear in the you can hear I have at least heard part of the song, and you can hear the title. You like there's no words, but you can hear it sung in the bass line. I love Supreme. I love Supreme. And how the bass line goes.
I struggle with these Bryer picks. Bryer picks these ones. I just don't know them well enough, so I wrote them down wrong. Okay, so Love Supreme?
Yeah, I love Supreme.
Okay, by John Coltrane. Number 36, Buffalo Springfield by Buffalo Springfield. Number 37, Butterfly by the Hollies. Number 38, The Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
39, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears by Mamas and Papas.
Yes.
That's correct.
Good.
The Toilet album.
Well, the Rolling Stones had a
Yeah.
album.
40, Led Zeppelin 2 by Led Zeppelin. 41, Arthur, parentheses,
Or the decline or the rise and decline of the British Empire.
The Rise and Decline of the British Empire by the Kinks. 42, The Beach Boys Today by the Beach Boys. 43, Electric Ladyland by Jimi Hendrix. Number 44, Help by the Beatles. Number 45, Aftermath by the Rolling Stones. I wrote down the Beatles. I don't know why. But
It was a very Beatlesque album, so I don't blame
I know
you.
that's not a Beatles album, so I had to look at it. But,
I see a red door and must paint it black.
Yeah, sorry. The Rolling Stones, yeah. Aftermath. Number 46, Bookends by Simon Garfunkel. 47, Piper at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd. 48, what I refer to as the White Album by the Beatles. 49, For Certain Because by the Hollies. And then to end our list, Magical Mystery Tour by the Beatles.
By the Beatles.
Beatles.
So that is the list. That is the central list.
As definitive list, we're
The
completely
definitive
right.
list.
Nothing
Nothing
else
else
nothing else matters.
Yeah,
no
if you have a different list, you are completely wrong.
All right. Let me just end with some chats here, okay? Side A and side B of the White Album doesn't have a clunker, but side 3,
Honey pie.
yeah. Well, side 4 especially has.
Yeah. Got one big blend.
Side A, I mean, Side A has what's it called Wild Honey
Oh,
Pie
honey
and
Yeah, yeah,
total rubbish.
yeah.
I like Bungalow Bill though.
Does Flying Blue Jay are amongst the very best for me on the Magical Mystery Tour album, I guess.
No.
I would disagree, but someone named Nicholas says there's lots of filler on the White Album.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not their biggest stuff, but it's great. Anyone mention the best psych rock album of the late 70s, SF Sorrow by Pretty Things?
Never heard of it.
Okay, I don't know that. Todd Rundgren.
Todd
did
Rundgren,
pretty
okay.
amazing albums with the garage rock band, The
The
Nas.
Nas, yeah, I've heard of the Nas. I haven't heard
Yeah,
anything
I'm
by
not
them, but I know they're pretty well known to this extent.
Okay. So psychedelic garage band, rock band, I guess. I'd recommend any of the Beefheart albums.
Any other ones besides Trout Matt Replica? His last, yes, I haven't heard anything, but yeah, like Zeb says, that his last studios are not as crazy as that one.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I mentioned the Rascals. Yeah, we didn't mention the Rascals. That's another good band.
The Rascals are more of a singles band for me.
I would say I don't know their albums very well right now. So
I know Good Lovin' and I know It's a Beautiful Morning.
Yeah.
That's about it.
there's some
No
good
one's
songs.
mentioned the Ruddles.
No Ruddles.
The Beatles totally copied them.
I know.
Like
Yeah.
they were I've heard that the Beatles and the Ruddles, like the rooftop concerts were happening on opposite rooftops, you know?
Mm,
All You Need Is Cash, I believe.
yeah.
The Love and Spoonful had hit singles. Yeah, I wish I could have got Love and Spoonful on there. Couldn't quite get it on the list. Great band. I'm not sure about their albums. Yeah, I think their first two albums are really good, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Never heard Grateful Dead, me either. The song to check out is Dark Star, any live version.
I haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah, Monkeys have some good albums. Yeah, Headquarters. I even wrote down another one, I think.
Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones is their best album.
Go
And
ahead and
my
say
favorite.
More of the Monkeys is good too.
More of the
First-
Monkeys I did have written down as well.
Even though they
Birds,
didn't know
Bees,
that
and
that album
Monkeys.
was put out.
the Birds, the Bees, and the Monkeys and the Pisces are my two favorite Monkeys albums.
Yeah, those could belong on there. We didn't quite get to those albums. There's
If
just
it
so
was
many.
like I said, if it was a top 100 essentials, then yeah, the Monkeys would have definitely been on that
It's
list.
just, that would be a 6-hour live stream or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going 3.5 hours. So
I probably
Yeah.
need to get going pretty soon. Speaking of that,
See, Mick Taylor, after leaving Stones, did some amazing music with Pierre
Okay.
Orlin.
All right. There's some decent stuff post Mick Taylor.
The two best late 60s albums for me is Soft Machine.
Oh yeah, I've heard. I have one by them, but they're
Warmed
like
Up.
a jazz. They're like a jazz fusion type of band.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't mention TCC. That would be 70s though. Okay.
I'm not in love, so don't forget it.
They had a really great song before that song on the 10cc soundtrack album.
And
It inspired Freddie Mercury to make Bohemian Rhapsody. It was like One Night in France or whatever.
Yeah.
One Night in
Yeah, that's a good one.
Paris.
That's a good one.
That's my favorite song by 10cc.
Oh,
all right,
you
we'll end on this. We just need to take some acid. Okay.
Expand the mind.
noted. I'm keeping noted.
Holly is
so
great.
Gotta find a dealer
right.
though.
This was a great live stream. This is a dream of mine to do this one. And it was amazing to talk music with these three guys. We've hit so many different stuff, and it's, I think, been a great conversation. Hopefully somebody will watch this and hopefully be like, wow, those guys know something. So thank you to Garrett from Soundlab Studios, Nick from Nick Y, and Bryer from Breyer's Music Showcase. Thank you for coming on and talking about 60s. I hope to do this again for the 70s at a later point. So from all of us to all of you, thank you. Keep listening to some good 60s music. Bye.
So long.